work. He's back now working, but he's still fairly frustrated and wants to do everything he can. So we're looking forward to seeing him at all the events which are coming. Me personally, looking forward to Trooping of Colour. Will he be on his horse? Will he not? We'll wait and see. But there are so many wonderful events that
so many wonderful events upcoming, and it's great to see the King back to his public duties. He spent nearly 3 months away from the public eye, which is quite a long time for King Charles, who's so active in everything he does. And I understand that he asked his aides to pack out his diary as much as possible now, which, of course, is a very good sign indeed. Helena, we're going to leave you there, I believe.
Well, yes, but we will return to you, though, so please don't close your laptop for us just yet. Please don't turn your camera off. Okay. We're going to come back to you in a second. I just wanted to remind ourselves that now I haven't seen this clip. Can I just preface what I'm about to say? I have not seen this clip for a year, but regular GB News viewers and listeners will remember our fantastic build-up to the coronation. And around this time last year, I was going up and down the Mall, meeting so many excited royalists and excited members of the British public who were absolutely gripped in the build-up to the coronation. And I think we've got a little clip here to remind us of some of that excitement.
Hey, Patrick, it's time for your show. Get up.
What time is it? What time is it?
I don't know.
Oh, flipping heck, I've got to get going. All right, OK, I'll see you at the studio. But I'm going to pan round now to an absolute GB News fan favourite. Here she is. Lita, how are you?
I'm smashing, Patrick. Hey, it's great to meet you in the flesh.
Absolutely. Now, people, eagle-eyed viewers and listeners will know you because we've interviewed you several times. And normally it's at your home.
Yeah, it is.
With how many thousands of pieces of memorabilia?
13,500 now. So.
13,500. And why are you so passionate about being here today, camping out and everything?
It's because I'm a monarchist, and for the whole of my life, I pledged my allegiance to the Queen. Queen Elizabeth II, and now this is a physical, visual display of my allegiance passing to the new king.
Is there any chance I might be able to pinch your crown? Thank you very much. Here we go. OK, well, look, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you're having as much fun as I am out here on the Mall. Now, Arthur, there's a reason why you and I don't get on about one thing, isn't that right? And I believe that we disagree massively on football. Who do you support?
Liverpool FC.
Liverpool FC. Well, I'm a Manchester United fan, so do you hate me now?
Don't know, not as much, but a bit.
And I see, though, that you've got a near enough life-size cardboard cutout here. I think, where on earth did you get this from?
Well, I purchased it.
Yes, I hope so. You know we didn't nick it. Go on, whereabouts from?
Well, you'd be surprised.
I have a chair. I do not have a tent, so I'll be sleeping in my chair.
No.
Yes, I have lots of layers of clothing. I have a sleeping bag. I'll be nice and warm and hopefully dry.
Good luck for tomorrow.
It's not mine, it's one of the soldiers. Oh, they're used to it. Well, they are roughing it a little bit. So. It don't get too wet, I hope.
Okay. Not too wet. Are you nervous for tomorrow?
Definitely. Are you still, sir?
I am soldiers.
Enjoy to see you again. I have the look with him.
Are you nervous for tomorrow?
It's a bit late to hear.
You were so excited.
This is the hand that shook hands with the king. This is it.
Yes.
This is it. I have watched it.
Lucky King Charles, eh?
Lucky King. I mean, did he know he was in the presence of... no, OK, maybe not. But there we go. Right,
it was a fantastic day. I mean, the excitement was palpable. I went down there. I wasn't reporting like you were, but just to soak up the atmosphere and see all the people who've been waiting patiently. And they camp out for days. For days. It's brilliant. Days. Yeah. It's brilliant. You love to see it.
It was one of the best things about Britain, that, I must say, genuinely. But, look, we are going to be talking about a few other bits and bobs today as well. We're also going to be talking about the local election results. And a UK-Ireland migrant row. Is the hard border in sight? It certainly looks as though it could be. But before all of that, we're going to whiz you over so you can get all of your latest bulletins now. So let's do it with Aaron Armstrong.
A very good afternoon to you. It's 12:10. I'm Aaron Armstrong. Rishi Sunak's conceded for the first time the Tories may not win the general election. The Prime Minister believes Britain's heading for a hung parliament, with Labour falling short of winning enough seats to form a majority government. And he says the public wouldn't want a coalition with the SNP. Rishi Sunak has described local election results as bitterly disappointing. The Conservatives lost nearly 500 council seats and a mayor's position in the West Midlands. But Women's Minister Maria Caulfield told GB News things aren't as bad as the polls suggest.
4 months now they've been saying that we're 20 points behind Labour, and actually when you look at the results from the local elections, and experts have done the drilling down on those numbers, it's between 7 to 9 points, and what we're actually looking for is a potential hung parliament, and if Labour then want to go into government, they would have to do deals with parties like the SNP, the Lib Dems, and parties like the Green Party as well.
However, Labour Chair Annalise Dodds says Rishi Sunak's interpretation of the results is incorrect.
Local elections are not a good predictor of general elections if you just look at the overall vote share, which is what he seems to have done. For example, very small parties tend to do far better in local elections. Independents tend to do better. And if you look at the places where Labour won, where Labour picked up support, it was in those constituencies that Labour will need in order to deliver a majority Labour government. So I'm afraid Rishi Sunak has got this wrong. He's tin-eared. He should be listening to that message to actually give people the chance for change.
John Swinney is set to become the next leader of the SNP later, after potential challenger pulled out late last night. Veteran party activist Graham McCormick's now endorsed Mr Swinney to become Scotland's next First Minister. He's the only official candidate now to replace Humza Yousaf, who announced he was stepping down last week, and nominations have now closed. And Heineken plans to reopen 62 pubs that closed earlier this year. The Dutch company says it will invest almost £40 million worth in its Star Pubs operation, creating 1,000 new jobs. It also says the plans to refurbish more than 600 establishments will turn them from tired pubs into premium locals. More on all of our stories on our alerts. Scan the QR code on your screen or go to our website, gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Patrick and Emily.
Thank you very much, Aaron. Welcome back to Good Afternoon Britain on GB News with me, Emily Carver, and Patrick Christie's today. Now, we just brought you live, didn't we, the 41-gun royal salute from in Green Park to mark the first-year anniversary of the King's coronation. Shall we speak again to royal broadcaster Helena Chard? Helena, thanks so much for staying on the line for us. I mean, really, it is quite extraordinary. The King has been away from the public eye for nearly 3 months, and he is just so keen to get back to all of the action. He wants his diary packed out to the max. He was at a Sunday service yesterday. He went to a hospital to greet patients and doctors and nurses at a cancer treatment centre. What else has he got on his agenda now?
Oh, there's so many things that are coming up. I mean, the royal diary, in fact, is sort of has started really for the summer. I know we've got Trooping of the Colour. He's hopefully going to be going to do some. Is it going to New Zealand? And I mean, there's lots of little ones he's doing as well. He's welcoming different people to the palace. But the main thing is he wants to get out and meet the people. That's his biggest thing. He loves people, and that's where he wants to be. And obviously, when we saw him at the cancer UCLH, the cancer unit, and he was talking with people and shaking hands, and there was a real sort of honesty. And I think he's obviously feeling, I think it's quite grounding as well. So there's a slight change in him, and that he can't wait to get out and meet people and obviously do what he's best at. I mean, he really does act as a focus for national identity. I mean, just seeing that, the video just now from last year, where everyone was so happy that the unity and pride and giving people a sense of stability, and that sort of feeling of belonging, that's what King Charles is all about, interfaith and everything that he does. And not to forget the soft power of diplomacy, and that is something very important. There is a long list of things that he's going to be doing. He really, really wants to do every one, but obviously he has to be at every event. Obviously, it'll be taken step by step. He obviously is doing every public-facing event he can do now, and things are going really well for him. His treatment has worked the best it possibly can. So we're thrilled. And I think everyone's in fine fettle. I imagine that I think the icing on the cake for him was if he could have his grandchildren around him, all of his grandchildren. Yes. But he's keeping going, and we're really very excited.
No, he's keeping on, isn't he? And just to remind everybody that at 1 p.m. we're going to be taking the 62 gun salute from Tower Wharf, an extra 21 for the City of London. So we really will be marking that 1 year on. And it does, just when you look back, we were playing some clips there that the royal family have just released, actually, which were kind of behind-the-scenes clips of more memorable moments from the coronation. To think, gosh, that was just over a year ago now. The build-up to it certainly was. Anyway, the sun was shining, and we'd all overcome, or were overcoming as a nation, the passing of our late Queen, and there was a bit of a renewed optimism that was initially sucked out when there was quite a bad year, the double whammy of the cancer diagnoses from the King. But it feels as though we're turning a corner there. And we were saying just before the break as well, Helena, that the popularity of the royal family is as strong as ever. 56% believe the King is doing a good job, which, considering he's been out of action for so long and having to lean on Queen Camilla for quite a while...
Much more popular than any politician, we should say.
But politicians would kill for those numbers. In fact, the only person whose popularity hasn't risen is, of course, the Duchess of Sussex, although can we even call her a proper member of the royal family? I'm not too sure, but the King is ready and raring to go. Look, Helena, can I just thank you very, very much for your time with us today and for talking over those wonderful clips for us as well. And we do hope to chat to you very, very soon. That's Helena Child there, who's a royal commentator and royal expert. But tonight, on my show this evening, I have an exclusive chat with Penny Mordaunt, who's the leader of the House of Commons. She's also played a pivotal role in that ceremony, hasn't she, on the coronation, famously holding the sword of state. And I had a little catch-up with her last week. We're going to be playing you a full interview with her later on, but here's a little flavour of it.
The sword was very heavy. The question I'd always asked myself when I was doing drill practice on Whale Island with my reserve unit in the pouring rain every Tuesday night was, why am I doing this? Now I know why. It was so I could hold that sword at the coronation.
That became one of the biggest talking points, didn't it, following the coronation? It's great to hear how she felt from her in her own words, really, there. It was quite a moment for the country. Interesting, that popularity survey that you were talking about, how everyone's more popular than they were a year ago, apart from the Duchess of Sussex. Princess Catherine, Princess of Wales, she is still topping that leaderboard, isn't she? She is still at the top. 70%, near 70% of us have a positive view.
It's hard not to like her, though, isn't it, really? I mean, what is there not to like about Princess Catherine? I think she's done an amazing job for this country. And just a couple of little snippets as well from that Penny Mordaunt interview later on. Obviously, we spoke a bit about the dress and the sword and all of that side of things. But what you might have noticed there was we were in the Privy Council room, and she shows me some really fascinating artefacts and gives a really interesting insight into actually what it was like behind the scenes for her, because within her first week or so of having that role, the Queen passed away, then there was an announcement of the coronation, there was all sorts going on, and she talked a bit about that. So, yeah, make sure you tune in later. But there's some other stuff on the news agenda.
Did you sense that she was quite nervous?
No.
Before? No?
No.
Just took it in her stride?
Yeah. She's a...
made for the job.
Yeah, I mean, we'll give you a heads up now, it's not a political interview. I know there's a huge amount of noise around Penny Mordaunt politically, and we will be talking about that later. Is she going to take on for Rishi Sunak? I know there's a lot of strong views about Penny Mordaunt. This is about the coronation, and I think I'd probably describe her as quite a formidable woman, actually.
Yes, people were asking what her workout routine is.
Yeah.
Because she managed to hold that rather heavy sword for so long in a straight line, asking her if she did some press-ups in advance. But shall we move on to politics?
Let's move on to politics.
Speaking of politics, because there's quite a bit of anger over Labour's position on the war in Gaza, and it's seen the party lose a number of councillors, dozens even, at the local elections, in an otherwise fairly strong set of results for the Labour Party.
Well, look, could this pose a much bigger problem? I would argue not just for the party, but for the country as well, at the general election. You have now got a Muslim pressure group called the Muslim Vote, issuing Sir Keir Starmer with a list of 18 demands.
Yes, it's quite interesting having a little look at what those 18 demands are. They include things like ceasing all military ties with Israel. They include things like recognising a Palestinian state, but also things like ensuring Sharia-compliant pensions are available at every workplace, removing the extremism definition that Michael Gove introduced, and also issuing guidance that Muslims are allowed to pray at school. Will Keir Starmer be listening to any of this? That's the question, really,
but does he have to listen? Does anyone have to listen?
Will
you know,
he?
I think they may be getting slightly above the station here. They have won a few council wards, but I just want to show you this clip, see what you make of it.
Horton, Great Horton, Manningham, Heaton, City Ward, and Collar. I'm going to tell you something here. This is a clear message to Starmer. Bradford has rejected Labour. It's rejected Zionism. And this is a message to you, Nash Shah and Imran Hussain. We are coming for you in the general election. Anyone that stands with Zionism, we're coming after you. Free Palestine!
Free Palestine!
OK, can I just pose the question, how do you think the country and the media would be responding today if that was a clip of someone from, say, Britain First, who was shouting about illegal immigration or we're coming for you for a variety of different things? Do you not think that there might be more mass concern in the nation today? But I'm sorry, I found that quite astonishing.
I mean, that clip did appear threatening. I'm not sure anyone could argue with that. I mean, obviously, someone might say he was overcome with emotion from the success of these candidates in the elections, but coming for you. Well, joining us now to discuss this is the former UKIP leader and president of the Conservative Primrose League, Henry Bolton. Henry, we just showed that clip there, but let's look at the broader picture here. I mean, how much influence is this Gaza situation having on our politics? Not just on the Labour Party. Clearly, there's a huge amount of pressure on Keir Starmer in some areas of the country. But more broadly, what's your assessment?
I think it's underestimated, Emily. Good afternoon. And it's very sad to be discussing something that's effectively so divisive and sectarian as this after the piece that you've been running on the anniversary of the Coronation, a massive unifying event. But there we are. Look, if you look at Ahmed Yaqub, who ran in the West Midlands mayoral election, he got 69,000 votes, campaigning almost exclusively on Gaza, Palestine, very much in the vein that we just heard that gentleman just now sort of talking about. He got 69,000 votes. That is just about twice what Reform got in that election. Everybody's been talking about Reform UK and you know how they're sort of influencing British politics, but we're not talking about the Muslim vote. And I've got a number of concerns about this. First of all, local government elections are absolutely not anything to do with foreign policy. They're about rubbish collection, they're about council tax, they're about potholes in your roads, there's all sorts of things, but not foreign policy, not defence, not that sort of thing. Now, I've long said that we've got an educational problem. We're not teaching our people, our children at school, what the difference is between the different elections. But that's one thing. The other thing is that we've got clear sectarianism here. The Muslim vote is very openly sectarian. It's about the Muslim cause, the Palestinian cause, the Gaza cause. It's not about local events. And that's very sectarian. Now, we know where sectarianism just leads. We saw it in Northern Ireland, in the Troubles in Northern Ireland. We've seen it around the world. It almost inevitably leads to some sort of conflict.
Henry, you know, people have been talking about this for a very long time. And people who were talking about it were told, A, it's nothing to worry about. B, you might be a racist for mentioning this. C, you know, hey, look, nothing will ever seriously happen. People are here to integrate. And then here we go. We've got a few local election council seat victories. We've got some strong performances in certain parts of the country. We have recently as well had an MP, George Galloway, in that Rochdale by-election. And immediately, the Muslim vote sends a list of 18 demands to a Labour leader who could well be about to be our next Prime Minister, by the way, that includes things like Sharia-compliant pensions. It's happening, Henry, isn't it? It's happening.
It is. It is. And I've been saying for a while that political Islam, which is what we're talking about here, is incompatible with democracy, because what happens, and this is not something that I've made up. This is anybody can go out and research this. Political Islam is based upon governance according to guidance contained in the Sharia, in the Quran. It is the sovereignty of God as interpreted in governmental form on earth, if you like. Now, that if you are interpreting or you are making decisions about how to govern everything from the economy to policing to education according to the interpretation of the Quran, you are not, and I said again, you are not governing for the people, by the people. You are not governing in what we would consider a democratic sense.
But Henry, just very quickly, just your response, we're running out of time, just your response to those who would say, well, this is democracy in action. These candidates, you may not like it, but these candidates got more votes than the others candidates.
This is the dilemma, Emily, because in a democracy, obviously the majority win, you know, or the biggest vote wins. And if they can achieve the biggest vote, then democratically they get into a position where they can enact political Islam, the law according to the Quran or interpreted from the Quran. And that is in itself incompatible with democracy. So democracy brings about its own downfall. So we've got to we've got to have a conversation about this with the Muslim community, amongst ourselves. It's a serious problem, because otherwise we will have politics guided by religious doctrine, not by popular will.
All right, Henry, look, can I just thank you very, very much. That's Henry Bolton there, the former leader of UKIP. There's been a heck of a lot of complacency in Britain. I think we can all agree, for a very long period of time. People maybe have allowed a problem in and allowed that problem to brew, and people feel maybe unwilling to go and run to be a local councillor, but are perfectly happy to complain about people that they might not like being elected to.
I mean, you wouldn't expect a Green councillor, a councillor running on a Green ticket to shout Allahu Akbar and we will raise the voice of Palestine as they win. But
also I think maybe it does show a thing or two about how desperate the Green Party, who the Green Party is willing to allow in order to get some votes. But look, we're going to be talking about this a heck of a lot. Get your views coming in as well. It's gbnews.com/your say. But elsewhere,
it is coming up. We're going to be coming back to this, so don't worry. We're also going to be coming back to another gun salute at the top of the 1 o'clock. But also e-bikes detonating across London. Is the electric revolution all it's cracked up to be? Goodness me, that footage is quite shocking. This is Good Afternoon Britain. We're on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Between 1955 and 1989, an average of 55 nuclear tests were conducted across the globe each year. More than 30,000 young British and Commonwealth servicemen served at British test locations in Australia and the Pacific Ocean. But in the years since, those who were involved say they've been ignored and lied to about their exposure to radiation. For decades, Lab Rats International has represented the millions across the world exposed to fallout from the testing programmes and the families who still suffer today from illness and deformities. Last year, the government unveiled the Nuclear Test Medal, recognising the military, civilian and overseas staff and personnel who participated in Britain's nuclear testing programme in the 1950s. But for Lab Rats founder Alan Owen, whose own father was a nuclear test veteran, the work is only just beginning. In September, they launched a legal challenge to the Ministry of Defence to provide the test veterans full medical records, which they say they've been denied access to.
We sit in this bubble as the nuclear test veteran community, fighting against the establishment. And they will say, you know, ministers will go in Parliament and say, all you've got to do is apply for your medical records and they'll give them to you. You know, it just doesn't happen. It's not a reality. They're not there to as easy, as accessible as just applying. They will fight you all the way. They will delay it.
In response, a government spokesperson said, "We are grateful to all service personnel who participated in the British nuclear testing programme, which is why we have formally recognised them with an official medal. Nuclear test veterans who believe they have suffered ill health due to service have the existing and long-standing right to apply for no-fault compensation under the War Pension Scheme." The fight for these veterans and their families lives on, because thousands who came before never got the recognition and justice for their service.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, good afternoon, Britain. It's 12:31. Now, the Prime Minister has suggested the UK is on course for a hung parliament and that voters do not want to see Sir Keir Starmer in number 10 propped up by the SNP or the Liberal Democrats.
Well, joining us now is political commentator Peter Spencer. Peter, thank you very much. This followed off the back of a prediction as well, which did suggest that, using some algorithm that there's no way on earth I will ever understand, that off the back of the local election results, the most likely outcome at a general election, as things stand, is indeed a hung parliament. Do you see it that way, and what would that look like?
I mean, I don't actually see it that way. I've known the two local election gurus, Starmer, Thrasher and Collins, for years, and like them and respect their work, but they have extrapolated this result on the basis of local council elections rather than most of the other polls that have been done, which have been based on sort of extrapolating in the direction of national elections. Now, in local elections, of course, independents are in more chance of getting in, and that skews the result. That's one point. The second point is that, of course, there was no voting taking place in Scotland. Now, it is worth remembering that until 9 years ago, Scotland was Labour bedrock. Then the SNP came along and took away 40 of their 41 seats. But, of course, since then, the SNP have gotten so their star has waned. Let's face it. They lost their star player, Nicola Sturgeon, and also then they had the financial crisis, which is still engulfing them. And then they had yet another leader and others. Now it looks like things are likely to settle down now because the new guy is allowed to get crowned, but it doesn't change the fact that Labour were leading the SNP in opinion polls even before the latest eruption.
Yes, and Peter, is this a bit of a negative campaigning strategy from Rishi Sunak now? He's seen the polls showing him at, what, 18%, the Conservative Party 18% last time I looked, saying, oh, if you vote for Keir Starmer, you're going to have some horrible coalition of all your worst enemies and all of that, trying to scare people to vote Conservative.
Well, I mean, absolutely, of course. I mean, when I hear him talking, I sort of feel like I'm on the deck of the Titanic watching him adjust the seating around here, a bit here and there. It doesn't change the fact the ship is sinking. And I mean, of course, he's got to say something. And it was obvious it's been obvious for a long time that the Conservatives were going to get a kick in the ballots, if you'll pardon the little wordplay there. And so they had to say something to sort of, in some way, limit the perception of damage. I mean, at least it would appear that the likelihood of a Sunak dumping putsch appears to be diminishing, but already people are on manoeuvres. We've got Suella Braverman basically making a pitch for being the leader after they have lost the next general election. I mean, some might say she's got more fun than ours, but there it is.
Yeah, well, look, Peter, thank you very, very much. Great to have you on the show. It's Peter Spencer, political commentator. We mentioned Suella Braverman. We're going to be hearing from Suella Braverman a little bit later on in this show. She's come out and said the Tories will be lucky to have any seats after the next general election. She's also been dishing some dirt on why she regrets having ever voted herself for Rishi Sunak to become leader or backed him to become leader, which I think is quite astonishing, really, when you think about where we are now. So we're going to be hearing from Suella a bit later on.
Yes, not awfully helpful for the Prime Minister, but there you go, there you go. Coming up, electric vehicles, are they safe? Recent events might make you reconsider. There's some quite shocking footage that we're about to show you. This is Good Afternoon Britain. We're on GB News, Britain's news channel.
And it's 25 to 1. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. Gun salutes have rung out across the capital, marking the first anniversary of King Charles' coronation. 41 volleys were fired by the King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery in Green Park in central London. The Archbishop of Canterbury has paid tribute to the King's sense of duty after his return to public life and says crowning him was the privilege of a lifetime. Rishi Sunak conceded for the first time the Tories may not win the general election. The Prime Minister believes Britain's heading for a hung parliament, with Labour falling short of being able to form a majority government. He says the public wouldn't want a coalition with the SNP. So Rishi Sunak has described local election results, though, as bitterly disappointing. The Conservatives lost nearly 500 council seats and the mayor's position in the West Midlands. The Prime Minister is urging his MPs to end divisions and come together to take on Labour. John Swinney's been confirmed as the new leader of the SNP. Nominations for the job closed at midday, and he was unopposed in the race to replace Humza Yousaf after veteran party activist Graham McCormick pulled out of the race late last night. Mr Swinney is due to be sworn in later this week. And could your local be on the verge of reopening? Heineken says it's going to invest almost £40 million to create 1,000 new jobs and, crucially, bring back 62 pubs that have closed this year. The Dutch company says it intends to transform hundreds of tired establishments into premium locals. And for the latest on our stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts, scan the QR code, or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. The M1 in West Yorkshire is closed northbound at junction 40 at Wakefield after an accident. Now, diversion's often back on via the slip roads, but long delays towards there. In Staffordshire, the A38 is closed northbound where a car's overturned between Clay Mills and the A50 at Toyota Island, causing delays heading towards Derby. Buses replaced trains between Leamington Spa and Nuneaton, between Bedford and Bletchley, and between Watford Junction and St Albans Abbey because of an overtime ban. In West Sussex, the A23 is partly blocked northbound where a car's overturned between Hand Cross and junction 11 of the M23 at Pease Pottage, causing queues. And in East Sussex, the A21 is closed each way between the Cripps Corner turnoff and Johns Cross roundabout after an accident. And the A21's closed southbound along London Road at St Leonard's for emergency repairs. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Children's stories like Peter Pan and Alice in Wonderland now come with a trigger warning at universities, alerting readers to possible themes of white supremacy.
Yes, these warnings are being applied to colonial narratives, that's the claim, commonly found in adventure stories and famous novels from the Victorian era. Well, joining us now is the actor Charlie Lawson. And Charlie, these warnings have been applied to Peter Pan and Alice in Wonderland. What's this university getting at?
Well, look, first of all, this is nothing new. We hadn't heard about it for a while. Universities have been doing this over the last couple of years. I remember having a chat with one of your colleagues. But when Gabriella, the lovely Gabby, phoned me up today, I had to beg her to put me on after 9 o'clock because I found myself getting rather irate about the whole thing. But I will do my best to be very polite.
Yes, keep it clean.
Yes, look, which is quite difficult for me, as you'll appreciate, over this subject. Look, this is universities just jumping on the same trying to be relevant bandwagon. Is it any wonder that we look at the quality of graduates from university, and in my humble opinion, some of them are slightly disappointing. But I did phone a couple of people I knew who had sons and daughters at various leading universities, and they had been speaking this morning. And thank the Lord, they think it's a complete load of bloody nonsense, as I do. Give the C.S. Lewis Centre a ring in East Belfast, because that's where your man came from. And I think you'll find you'll get short shrift, because we're not all about that in East Belfast. We don't censor anything.
Well, there's lots of news about illegal immigration to bring you. Is the Rwanda bill starting to work? So Irish ministers are now pointing fingers at Rishi Sunak's government over the Prime Minister's removal policy. The spat is putting relations between the two nations under serious strain. And there's quite a lot going on. So shortly we're going to be going to Dublin, where there are tent cities of these illegal migrants now. And also it's going off a bit at the border, isn't it, between the two countries, the North and the Republic?
Yes, reportedly, migrants have pitched dozens of tents along the banks of Dublin's Grand Canal, so right in the city centre. And that's days after hundreds were evicted from the tent cities, what people were calling them, in the city. So essentially, migrants have been moved from one area to another. So what exactly is going on? Joining us now to discuss this is former Ambassador for Ireland, Dan Mulhall. Dan, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
You're very welcome.
A very difficult situation in Ireland at the moment when it comes to migration. We were hearing reports that tent cities were being evicted, being moved on. Now it appears as though migrants are setting up tents on Dublin's Grand Canal and also at the border. What's going on?
Well, of course, this has become a major political issue fairly quickly in Ireland. I would say if you go back to the last election in 2019, or 2020, probably it was not in the top 10 items on the electorate's agenda. Now I think it's probably number 2 or thereabouts as an issue. So obviously our parties like yours are under pressure to find some kind of solution to this problem. The problem really goes back, I think, to the start of the war in Ukraine, because since that time, Ireland has taken in more than 100,000 Ukrainians, which would be the equivalent of 1.2 million in Britain. And that has put a huge strain on the available accommodation. And what it's meant is that now that we have a surge of asylum seekers, there's simply no available space, no rooms that can be allocated to these people coming in seeking asylum, and therefore it has become a problem because it's now become very visible with these tent cities on the streets, and the government's under pressure to do something about it.
Yeah, and I think that visibility also ties in with, let's be honest, rapid demographic change as well, given the certain nations that quite a lot of the people who are actually on the streets in Ireland are coming from, which probably adds to the, I suppose, visual element of tension, does it not?
Well, of course, most of the migrants in Ireland come from the European Union, so they're not really identifiably not Irish. And in fact, we've had very good experience of integrating people from Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, and so forth. Obviously, asylum seekers pose a different kind of challenge, but this is a global problem, and there are no simple solutions. People say close the border. Well, Britain has closed its borders to illegal immigrants. Every country in the world does that, but it doesn't stop people from coming. You know yourself, people will risk their lives in leaky boats traveling across the Channel or traveling across the Mediterranean to get to Europe from North Africa. So, there is no simple solution to this problem. But I think what's happened in Ireland now is that it's gone up the political agenda, which means that the government's now having to give it priority attention. And there are no easy solutions, but I think we will see a stepping up of our efforts to deal with this issue, to provide more accommodation, but also to make it tougher for people to come into Ireland and to try and process people more quickly and remove them when they are not entitled to asylum status.
Yeah, and the controversial thing from the British standpoint is, of course, what the Irish government has been saying about how they would like migrants to be sent back to the United Kingdom. Have the Irish government updated their stance on that following Rishi Sunak saying, absolutely not, we can't send migrants back to France, so therefore you can't send them back to the United Kingdom?
I met the Foreign Minister, Micheál Martin, there at a function in Dublin last week, and he said, we need to park the noise on this one. In other words, we need to stop, megaphone diplomacy at each other. We need to sort of sit down and sort things out. I don't think anybody believes that we're going to be able to send thousands of people back to Britain. But there has been an agreement in place since 2020. And by the way, only about a handful of people have ever been transferred in either direction. The Irish courts recently decided that Britain was no longer a safe country The Irish government is now correcting that, which means that if there are people that fall into a category that are covered by this agreement, then, you know, both sides will take them back. In fact, over the last number of years, apparently, Ireland's taken more from Britain than Britain has taken from Ireland. But nonetheless, this needs to be calmed down. We need to sit down together like, you know, good neighbours and try and find a way of dealing with this problem. I mean, if there are illegal traffickers using Northern Ireland as a route for their trafficking, then I think, you know, both governments have an interest in curbing that.
I do just wonder, though, you know, from our perspective over here, and, you know, some people might think, well, it's all very well and good saying this now, and I've got the Irish Independent, the Irish Sun and the Irish Mirror in front of me here, all of whom are talking about whether or not they support migrant checkpoints at the border. Tell us if you support checkpoints at the Northern Irish border. All of this stuff. This is what's doing the rounds at the moment in the Irish press. You mentioned there that the Republic of Ireland, when it suited them, declared the United Kingdom an unsafe country.
No, sorry. Our courts, one of our courts did that.
Your courts did, yeah, but it
doesn't mean that. The government doesn't take that view.
Dan, it was also a political decision to take the United Kingdom to the ECHR over the veteran prosecutions as well. And
that's a negative. I mean, that's a separate matter.
Yeah, but it all plays into this realpolitik of the situation, doesn't it? And there was also I would argue, gleeful disdain towards the United Kingdom when Joe Biden's visit was there. So now it's going against you a bit on the migrant front. Why should we throw our arms open back and say, oh, you just declared us safe again now, that's fine, we'll do some deals with you?
Well, because, I mean, there is an agreement in place. We have a common travel area for the last 100 years, which, by the way, was maintained during the Troubles in Northern Ireland. So there is no way in which that common travel area, which benefits both countries, by the way, and both peoples, should be put in jeopardy. I don't see any way in which the Irish government is ever going to check people at the border between North and South in Ireland. But I mean, you know, obviously there is a problem with migration. It's a problem all over Europe. It's a problem all over the world, all over the Western world. It's a problem in Britain and Ireland. And all I would be looking for is for the two governments, which I'm sure they will do, to sit down together and see, are there things that we can cooperate on? Are there ways in which we can tighten the situation? Are there ways in which we can curb people who are engaging in people trafficking using our territory? So, I mean, I am fully sympathetic to the British, problems with the people coming across across the channel in boats. This is clearly an illegal activity. It shouldn't be happening, and it shouldn't be happening in Britain. It shouldn't be happening in Ireland. But we've got to find solutions to the problem. There's no point in bleating about how dreadful this is. We have to sit down as mature governments and try and find ways of dealing with the problem of migration, which is a major problem now for Ireland as well as for Britain. It's a more recent problem for us, so we have to get used to this. We always thought that we were at the end of the migrant chain, and therefore we probably wouldn't be affected very much. Until recently, migrants haven't been that visible in Ireland. The numbers were growing, but they haven't been that visible. Overall, we've got about 17% of our population now born outside the state. But for the most part, most of those people are living legally in Ireland and are contributing to our economy. And for me, at least, they're welcome to be in Ireland.
OK. Well, thank you very much indeed for your time. Really appreciate it. Dan Mulhall, Ambassador for Ireland. Great to speak to you. Great to speak to you. I mean, all of the reports of, police being near the border and these surveys where people would be willing to have checkpoints at the border. I mean,
people have been talking about this for years, and now it's a problem for them. All of a sudden, it's diplomacy. We need diplomacy. We're old friends. They were not friends with us, or wanted to be anyway, until very recently.
Well, coming up. Are we in danger of giving our treasures away if Labour get into power? We're going to be debating this because one leader of one country is hopeful that under a Labour government, their treasures would be returned. We'll be discussing this very soon. Stay with us.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News forecast. Through Bank Holiday Monday, it's rather wet. There'll be some heavy thundery showers in places, but there will be some warm sunshine. That's thanks to an area of low pressure, but it's all changed through the week ahead. High pressure is going to build in for much of the country, bringing some dry weather with some warm spells of sunshine. Back to the rest of Bank Holiday Monday. Some heavy downpours across southeast England that could lead to some local disruption. Elsewhere, sunny spells and scattered heavy showers, some slow-moving hail and thunder in there too. Met Office warnings in force. Cloudier and drier for Northern Ireland, Northern Scotland. In the sunshine, temperatures again approaching 19 or 20 Celsius. Under the cloud, around 14 or 15 degrees. Thunderstorms start to ease through the evening time. Still some rain affecting southeast England, which could be heavy at times, but into the early hours it gradually pulls away. Overnight it's largely dry. There could be some drizzle in the thicker clouds, some low cloud mist and murk developing as well. Temperatures generally holding up well above freezing, but a grey start to Tuesday. Low cloud mist and fog slowly lifting and breaking, and then through the day, yes, there'll be quite a lot of cloud, but it will brighten up as the day goes on. There will be some sunny spells that develop, but where the sunshine develops, particularly in the south, we could again see some heavy showers developing here. Temperatures approaching 20 Celsius, further north around the mid-teens.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News. The
People's Channel. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me.
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now, do you have an e-bike at home? Do you use one? Do you know someone who has one? Because they're being blamed for surging numbers of battery fires, particularly in London. Fire chiefs are warning against plans to legalise the more powerful models.
Well, that's no powerful e-bikes for me for my birthday, but 149 fires have been caused in London alone by e-bikes in 2023. So it's an astonishing number. I shudder to think what the reality is outside of London as well. Joining us now to discuss this growing problem is Tony Campbell, Chief Executive of the Motorcycle Industry Association. Tony, thank you very much. I mean, hey, look, you do not get 143 or however many it was fires every single day with motorbikes or indeed normal bicycles, do you? What's going on with the e-bikes?
No, you certainly don't. And good afternoon to Patrick and Emily. So, yeah, I mean, the big problem we're seeing develop here is twofold. One is, you know, cheap online bikes which are being bought that aren't of the right quality, etc. And then the other problem which we're seeing is that you can get these kits from off of online marketplaces, which you can then retrospectively fit to bicycles. And it's clear that these kits are not of the right quality and standard. You know, there are lots of high quality products out there which sold by reputable retailers. And I'm pretty certain there won't be any issues there.
So, Tony, are people essentially, if I get this right, are people essentially sort of making their own e-bikes? And these are the problems. People are attaching things onto them that shouldn't be there.
Yeah, well, I would say that probably is a large percentage of where the problems are being caused. You know, basically what causes these fires is what's called thermal runaway. So as they're being recharged, which is why they typically will catch fire, as we can see on screen now, in the home or in the office. And of course, in those circumstances is when it's going to cause the most amount of damage. Now, obviously, if it's a very cheap, low quality product bought, purchased either online and not tested to the right standards, or it's retrospectively built from a standard bicycle, which is actually a lot more common than people realise. You know, these items are, you know, low cost. People think it's a cheap way to give themselves some mobility, which is understandable. But at the same time, obviously, you're causing a high risk of fire, which is what we're now seeing.
I mean, yeah, the whole point of the e-bikes, in a sense, I suppose, was partly environmental, wasn't it? And I do wonder whether or not some of those batteries and the components that they're made out of and where you have to go to get them, and then the subsequent massive explosion and fire attached to it, just slightly shatter the notion that maybe these things are better for the environment.
Yeah, I think what we have to do is, I mean, you know, if you look at the whole life cycle, so how's the battery produced, where's the raw materials coming from, so on and so forth. I think there is some questionable arguments around the green credentials of e-mobility, more generally speaking. But I think the biggest issue we're seeing here is that there is regulation that's in place. There is the Machinery Directive, which covers bicycle production, and that also covers the legal e-bike, so up to 250-watt pedal-assisted, and generally, you know, those products are very, very safe. What we're now seeing is a myriad of products which are turning up on, you know, being used in the market. And these products are generally illegal, and there has been zero enforcement. So we're now, you know, sort of the bike that's on screen at the moment, not the green one, the one previously, you know, those bikes can and are capable of 40 or 50 mile an hour, you know, in unregulated, no license, no insurance, no tax, you know. So, you know, it's about time authorities clamp down. We're actually calling for a regulatory review. And it's that regulatory review which will, you know, eventually take a look at this and hopefully address this issue.
Well, yeah, definitely. If they're such a safety hazard, they could just explode. There likely does need to be a bit more regulation about. That's what the E stands for. That's what the E stands for. Thank you very much, Tony Campbell, Chief Executive of the Motorcycle Industry Association. Great to have your time on this one. That's what the E stands for.
It's a massive problem to you. So you've got them in your garage, you've got them in wherever, you know, and all of a sudden they just go bang, especially if you get one for your kid or something. So make sure you don't buy a dodgy e-bike.
Yes, and don't DIY your e-bike either. Not a good idea. But up next, we have another royal gun salute for you. Today, of course, marks 1 year since the anniversary of the coronation of King Charles III. This is Good Afternoon Britain. We're on GB News.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather. It starts to settle down over the next 24 hours after today's heavy rain, but there will be some fog patches, particularly at night, and that's thanks to an area of high pressure. Low pressure moves out the way, high pressure moves in for the week ahead, largely settling it down. Some weather fronts across the northwest at times bringing some rain. This evening time, still some rumbles of thunder, some heavy rain in places, but it does slowly ease as we head towards midnight and into the early hours. The rain just taking its time to clear the far southeast, but generally dry overnight, some splashes of light rain in places, but a lot of cloud, some low cloud too, making it murky over the hills and around the coasts. Temperatures largely remaining in double figures. So it means a grey start to Tuesday morning, some hill fog in places, but as we go through the morning into the afternoon, should lift and break to allow some brighter skies to develop, some sunny spells, particularly across the south and the west. But where we get some sunny spells, it will help trigger a few showers, not as heavy compared to today, but some of them could be on the sharp side. Fewer in between as well, so many places dry with sunny spells. Temperatures again reaching 19 or 20 Celsius in the best of the sunshine. For Wednesday, a murky start again, some fog patches in places, but slowly lifting and breaking, allowing some dry weather and bright weather to develop. Similar for Thursday and Friday as that high pressure builds in, temperatures begin to rise as well.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Well, good afternoon. Welcome to a very special Good Afternoon Britain with me, Emily Carver.
And me, Patrick Christys, and it is the anniversary of one of the most momentous days in British history. It's the coronation of King Charles III, and we are, any second now, going to be bringing you the latest gun salute. There we are. It's a 62 gun salute, this one. We brought you a 41 gun salute in the last hour, a 62 gun salute this time round. You'll be able to see the famous Tower of London in the background. So they are going to be firing any moment. And there we go. We've got Richard Fitzwilliams with us as well, who's going to be doing a little bit of commentary for us, telling us what all of this really means.
Is Richard there? Is Richard there? Very quickly, we've got 30 seconds until the gun salute is off. So, Richard, just tell us what we're expecting to see. What are we looking at?
We're looking at the Honourable Artillery Company, and they will be giving a 62 gun salute. They're part of 6 gun salutes, the King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery inclusive, and Edinburgh Castle, that commemorate the anniversary of the coronation today.
Well, I think it's about to start firing. By my clock, anyway, we have now 7 seconds until the first one goes off. So should we just take this first one live, and then we'll talk over the rest of them? Hang on. There we go. There we are. They're well underway, Richard. So what is the significance of this? Why do we have gun salutes for the King?
Well, a form of commemoration without, for example, including vast crowds and the like. I mean, it marks important royal events, and it's one of the traditions. I mean, King Charles is in Windsor at the moment. There are no official commemorations of this anniversary. But nonetheless, considering that we are the only country in Europe that still has a coronation, and the fact that it was as impressive as it was last year, I mean, this will be a source of, I think, pride to the King, especially since, and I touch wood when I say this, that all seems to be going in the right direction regarding his illness.
And this is the Honourable Artillery Company Regiment. Presumably this is quite the honour.
Oh, yes, indeed. And also they are an extremely significant body in the city of London. And the King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery also are involved in gun salutes, and there are Hillsborough Castle in Northern Ireland, in York, and also in Edinburgh Castle. So it's being commemorated, but there are no specific celebrations other than, of course, memories. And there's been some extra footage released online, and people also will think back and think, oh, what an impressive ceremony it was. I mean, it's an interesting look at Britain's soft power, that about 160 countries were represented at the coronation, and of course it was done in such a different way to the 1953, as you would expect.
Yes, no, indeed. Now, look, Richard, stay where you are, please, my good man, if that's OK, because we will come back to you. There's a lot to talk about in the royal news today. The latest royal opinion polls are out. King Charles doing rather well. The royal family as a whole doing rather well. The only person who's not doing that well is Meghan Markle. Although why on earth she's still included in the polls of the actual royal family, I don't know. We're going to be talking about the King's health as well. And I've got a little interview to bring people this evening on my later show, 9 to 11 p.m, with Penny Mordaunt, who was actually the well, apart from the King and the Queen, the unexpected star of the coronation show. I was talking to her a year on, and we are going to be reminding ourselves of me walking up and down the Mall in the run-up to it. So it was all going off. Look, we've got a big segment coming your way after your bulletins with Alex Armstrong. Aaron Armstrong.
Very good afternoon to you. It's 3 minutes past 1. I'm Aaron Armstrong. John Swinney has been elected as the new leader of the SNP. Nominations for the job closed at midday, and he was unopposed in the race to replace Humza Yousaf after the Veteran Party activist Graham McCormack pulled out of the race late last night. Mr Swinney is likely to be voted in as Scotland's new First Minister later this week. Rishi Sunak's called for unity amongst his MPs after conceding for the first time the Tories may not win the general election. The Prime Minister believes Britain's heading for a hung parliament, with Labour falling short of enough seats to form a majority government. He says the public won't want a coalition with the SNP. Well, the Conservatives lost nearly 50 council seats and the West Midlands mayoralty, results Rishi Sunak has described as bitterly disappointing. Women's Minister Maria Caulfield told GBNews, though, things aren't as bad as the polls suggest.
4 months now they've been saying that we're 20 points behind Labour, and actually when you look at the results, from the local elections, and experts have done the drilling down on those numbers. It's between 7 to 9 points, and what we're actually looking for is a potential hung parliament. And if Labour then want to go into government, they would have to do deals with parties like the SNP, the Lib Dems, and parties like the Green Party as well.
However, the Labour chair, Annalise Dodds, says Rishi Sunak's interpretation of the results is incorrect.
Local elections are not a good predictor of general elections if you just look at the overall vote share, which is what he seems to have done. For example, very small parties tend to do far better in local elections. Independents tend to do better. And if you look at the places where Labour won, where Labour picked up support, it was in those constituencies that Labour will need in order to deliver a majority Labour government. So I'm afraid Rishi Sunak has got this wrong. He's tin-eared. He should be listening to that message to actually give people the chance for change.
Metropolitan Police detectives have launched a murder investigation after a man was stabbed in a street fight in East London on Sunday night. A 38-year-old man was found suffering a single stab injury. It was just off a busy high road in Bethnal Green. Scotland Yard says officers are still working to inform the victim's family, with formal identification yet to take place. Russia says it will hold exercises with tactical nuclear weapons after what the Kremlin has described as threats from France, Britain and the United States. The President, Vladimir Putin, has ordered the exercises amid Russian warnings of rising nuclear risks. Russian defence sources say the drill is aimed at ensuring the country's territorial integrity and sovereignty in response to what it says are provocative statements and threats by certain Western officials against the Russian Federation. And gun salutes have rung out across the capital, marking the first anniversary of King Charles' coronation. 41 volleys were fired by the King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery in Green Park in central London. The Archbishop of Canterbury's paid tribute to the King's sense of duty after his return to public life and says crowning him was the privilege of a lifetime. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts, scan the QR code on your screen, or go to the website for more details. Now it's back to Patrick and Emily.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Aaron Armstrong, for bringing us those headlines. Now, as you've seen, we've just seen the two gun salutes, the two royal gun salutes to mark the first year anniversary of the King's coronation. Now, cast your mind back to a year ago when this one, Patrick Christie's, was out on the Mall, weren't you?
I was.
You look a bit sheepish there.
I was out and about. They unleashed me.
Unleashed him to celebrate all this and to meet lots of lovely people who were very excited indeed to catch a glimpse of King Charles. Shall we have a little look back?
King Charles, they're excited about me.
Patrick, it's time for your show. Get up.
What time is it? What time is it?
I don't know.
Oh, flipping heck, I've got to get going. All right, OK, I'll see you at the studio. But I'm going to pan round now to an absolute GB News fan favourite. Here she is. Lisa, how are you?
I'm smashing, Patrick. Hey, it's great to meet you in the flesh.
Absolutely. Now, people, eagle-eyed viewers and listeners will know you because we've interviewed you several times. And normally it's at your home.
Yeah, it is.
With how many thousands of pieces of memorabilia?
13,500 now. So.
13,500. And why are you so passionate about being here today, camping out and everything?
It's because I'm a monarchist, and for the whole of my life, I pledged my allegiance to the Queen. Queen Elizabeth II, and now this is a physical, visual display of my allegiance passing to the new king.
Is there any chance I might be able to pinch your crown? Thank you very much. Here we go. OK, well, look, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you're having as much fun as I am out here on the Mall. Now, Arthur, there's a reason why you and I don't get on about one thing, isn't that right? And I believe that we disagree massively on football. Who do you support?
Liverpool FC.
Liverpool FC. Well, I'm a Manchester United fan, so do you hate me now?
Don't know, not as much, but a bit.
And I see, though, that you've got a near enough life-size cardboard cutout here. I think, where on earth did you get this from?
Well, I purchased it.
Yes, I hope so. You know we didn't nick it. Go on, whereabouts from?
Well, you'd be surprised.
Well, I have a chair. I do not have a tent, so I'll be sleeping in my chair.
No.
Yes, I have lots of layers of clothing. I have a sleeping bag. I'll be nice and warm and hopefully dry.
Good luck for tomorrow.
It's not mine, it's one of the soldiers. Oh, they're used to it. Well, they are roughing it a little bit. So. Didn't all get too wet, I hope.
Not too wet. Are you nervous for tomorrow?
Are you still sick?
No, so I am soldiers.
Enjoy to see you again.
Are you nervous for tomorrow?
It's a bit late for me, isn't it?
Oh, take me back. What a time that was.
It was a lovely time, and the weather was nice.
Oh, the weather was great.
The weather was lovely.
GB, we were the only broadcaster, actually, to go all week there. So the other broadcasters turned up, I think, the day before the coronation or 2 days before. We did it all week. And the best bit about it, genuinely, and I'm not just saying this, was getting to wander up and down the Mall and seeing so many GB News viewers and staunch royalists, etc.
I think you spoke to literally every single person.
I loved it. I absolutely loved it. It was a fantastic time.
And everyone wanted to speak, didn't they?
Everyone wanted to talk.
Wanted to speak and say what they were looking forward to.
Yeah, and it was a time of optimism after the Queen's passing. You know, it felt like there was a bit of a corner being turned there. One of the standout performers, if you can say that,
I think it was a performance.
After the during the coronation, was Penny Mordaunt, who's leader of the House of Commons, but she's also the leader of the Privy Council. Now, last week I went to have a little chat with Penny Mordaunt, and we're going to be playing you the full interview. It's all about the coronation, about her role in it, and some interesting behind-the-scenes information as well. Here's a little snippet of what you're going to be getting later, 9 till 11 p.m.
Well, one of my favourite quotes is from the composer Mahler. And he said that tradition is not the worship of ashes, it's the preservation of fire. And I think that's what the royal family, what they stand for, what they do, that service and duty to us.
Well, there's Penny Mordaunt speaking exclusively to Patrick here, so you'll get more of that later on tonight from 9 o'clock.
Yes, indeed. We cover a lot of ground, actually. Really interesting. I felt like I've not seen her in that light before, so maybe some of our viewers will be intrigued by it. I certainly hope so.
Yes, indeed. But every senior member of the royal family has seen a bit of a boost in popularity since the coronation. Must say, apart from the Duchess of Sussex, that's according to a new poll. Patrick isn't so surprised about that one. 56% believe the king is doing a good job, compared to 49% a year ago. Well, that's quite the boost. That's quite the boost. And, of course, that is very different from the average politician, eh? No politician. Politicians are always in the negative, aren't they?
Imagine?
Always in the negative.
A politician on 56% approval rating. I mean, good grief. They'd be in power for decades, wouldn't they, really, that kind of stuff? But,
they would be. Should we bring back in Richard Fitzwilliams to talk us through this popularity contest we're seeing here? Do you think the royal family's on the up? I mean, there's lots of people who are out and about, the activists, the Republicans, out saying how we should be a republic and we should have no monarchy. But do you think the vast majority of people still want us to have a monarch?
Oh, absolutely. This poll is, I think, encouraging. I mean, it can't be denied that after the death of Queen Elizabeth, I think quite a lot of people were wondering, you know, how popular the monarchy would continue to be. It's also true that, say, 10 years ago, these figures in favour of the monarchy were quite a lot higher. But there's no question also that if you've got a support of around 60%, I mean, political parties, you were mentioning politicians and their negative ratings. I mean, any political party would give its eye teeth for ratings even remotely like that. Republic is under 30, and yes, they have a rally of sorts, about 100 people attending, according to the Daily Mail. I mean, there's no question at all. There's always been a certain relatively small Republican base of support. But what is curious, and I think you can link this directly to the behaviour of the Sussexes, the 18 to 24-year-old group, they do tend to have Republican leanings. And the reason for that, I think, is linked to the fact that the last few years have been very difficult for the royal family, and with several attacks, particularly Oprah, that dreadful and infamous interview that the Sussexes gave, and also their 6-hour Netflix series, Harry and Meghan, and also Harry and Spare, a whole series of attacks over 4 years. I mean, it has, together with Andrew's disgrace, it has affected royal ratings, but I do think this is very encouraging because not only is the King doing well, as you mentioned, 56%, but also the Prince and Princess of Wales have superb ratings, and again, very, very encouraging, I think, last week to see King Charles on 3 occasions. So
yes,
the future is looking good at a very, very troubled and tricky time.
Now, Richard, one of the reasons why I think we are seeing the Republican movement so staunch amongst the younger people is because, in my view, all too often now they're being taught to hate this country, they're being taught about the negatives of Britain's past, or they're being lied to about some of the negatives of Britain's past. And one of the movements as well is stuff like we're going to talk about now. So, Richard, I hope that you've got your debating hat on, because we are going to have a bit of a head-to-head on this, because the government has refused to amend legal constraints on repatriating museum artefacts, but the Labour Party has not set out a policy position as yet.
Yes, so the question that some are asking is, if Keir Starmer becomes Prime Minister, will he be more likely or less likely to give away our national treasures? And will he do so? Apparently the Ghanaian king believes that he has more of a chance of getting some treasures back if Keir Starmer is in power.
Well, that's it. All this talk now about vote reform, get Labour, you know, vote Labour, please the Ghanaian king, everybody. But joining us now to discuss this is former Labour Minister Dennis McShane, and we've still got royal commentator Richard Fitzwilliams. Dennis, I'll start with you. You know, under a Labour government, you'd just give everything back to everybody else, wouldn't you, and let it fall into their hands.
Patrick, I love your previous item on the popularity of the King, and he deserves it. But I've just checked. British journalists, only 18% of the British people trust journalists. We have one of the lowest ratings in journalist trust. So let's just ignore perhaps what journalists have been writing about this. I'll tell you a true story. 1997... New Labour government, guy called Chris Smith, first gay minister, is the culture secretary, and I talk to him and I say to Chris, now, what about the Elgin marbles, the Parthenon marbles? Any chance of those going back to Greece? He froze in terror, in horror, and said, for God's sake, Dennis, please don't mention it, don't raise it in the House, don't write an article about it, because he knew perfectly well Tony Blair wasn't remotely interested. And I've talked to a number of cabinet ministers, shadow cabinet ministers, I mean, about the next Labour government. And let me tell you, I don't think Keir Starmer has got the slightest intention of giving anything back.
Well, why haven't they set out their policy on this all?
Well, frankly, I think if we're looking at the state of the NHS, the armed services, the potholes in our roads, education, the absence of training, I think, Emily, even you might agree that there's slightly more important priorities than passing complicated acts of Parliament. The Ashanti people of Ghana were conquered, taken over by Britain after 1824. Mm-hmm. We sent their children, men, women as slaves to the West Indies, to the British colonies in the West Indies. They had 4 actual wars against us. I don't think any of this is ever taught in schools. I mean, I certainly wasn't taught it at school or at Oxford. And finally, it took until 1957 before they come free.
I am, however, Dennis, reading numerous different articles. Keir Starmer open to return of Parthenon marbles, reports say. That's in The Guardian. Keir Starmer open to deal on the Elgin marbles, the Financial Times. These are not right-leaning newspaper outlets, Dennis. Elgin marbles could be loaned back to Greece under Labour. Richard, are our marbles and our artefacts safe under a Labour government, do you think?
Well, I think, firstly, I do think it's a complicated question. The 1963 Act, as it stands, forbids the various national museums to give articles back, hence the fact that this loan has been specially arranged with the Sandaheni, the king of the Ashantis, with the background, some of the background that Dennis has just illustrated. Now, whether or not the Act will be changed again, there are 2 exceptions, human remains and also plunder by the Nazis. If there are 2 exceptions There can be 3 exceptions, and the government, they may very well consider changes to this because there are a variety of artifacts, for example, sacred relics from Ethiopia, which no one is permitted to see other than Ethiopian clergy, so the museum's trustees can't see them. I mean, that is ridiculous to have in the British Museum when they have real relevance in Ethiopia. And also there's the issue of the Penny bronzes. The point is to come to some sort of balance on this, whereby our museums don't get suddenly denuded of treasures, but on the other hand, in certain specific cases, it does seem to me there are very good reasons for either loans, long-term, or exchange, or some form of gift. It depends on the individual case, and I think that there are very strong feelings on this in different countries, and the history goes back and, of course, varies tremendously.
So you have to take things on a case-by-case basis. Dennis, do you think we should give up the Elgin marbles?
The Parthenon marbles, they're controversial. They were hacked off, literally, with pickaxes and a saw by Lord Elgin, protected by the Royal Navy in the beginning of the 19th century. And he brought them back off the founding building of European democracy, the Acropolis, the Parthenon. He hacked off. It's like King William dismantling Stonehenge and re-erecting it in Paris. I mean, King William the Conqueror, not the future King William, of course. And Elgin he was a syphilitic Tory lord. His wife quite sensibly divorced him, and he needed the money for a divorce settlement. So he flogged them to the British government. There's a big debate in the House of Commons. A lot of people were very angry at the sheer vandalism of it, because Britain, is a home to probably the world's greatest Hellenist specialist in antique Greek history. And the current Greek Prime Minister, he's talked to different people, to I don't know which Prime Minister he's talked to about it, but Lord Ed Vaizey, who was the Tory Culture Minister, he's in favour of it. They're talking about it as a loan. That's tricky, but I just think, God, we need friends.
Just to finish, I mean, Richard, do you think that the mood music is changing a bit on this, and that it may not be next year, but in a few years, perhaps a decade or so, we will just empty our museums because it's the politically correct thing to do?
Ridiculous. We won't empty our museums because I think that would be ridiculous. But there are specific cases which, as Dennis has just been discussing. I mean, the taking from Ottoman-ruled Greece these treasures. If in 2009, near the Acropolis, I was there last December, the Greeks have a magnificent museum, and it's really something the human spirit soars when you go in there and you see the background to it all. And when you actually consider that it's very, very likely that there'll be some form of long-term permanent loan with something given back by the Greeks to the British Museum, the whole point is to handle it in a civilised way. There was a contretemps between the Greek Prime Minister and our Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, on this very issue quite recently. So it won't happen under the current government, but it's very likely to happen, I suspect.
But that's the great point, because when all that was erupting, they were much more inclined to go and meet the Labour leaders, and it was because they felt they were more inclined that under a Labour government they would give their treasures back. I mean, I'm reading an article here. Tristram Hunt, MP, bowed before a Ghanaian king before handing back looted gold. I mean, what on earth is happening to Great Britain? We're diminished on the world stage. We're even removed. The idea that Tristram Hunt would bow before a Ghanaian king and hand back some, quote, looted gold. I mean, what the flipping heck is happening? What's becoming of us?
But wait a second. That is an outrageous description, Patrick. You know perfectly well. Firstly, in front of a king, it is respectful to bow. Yes, in his description, Tristram Hunt talked about the fact they'd been looted, and the Ghanaians, in fact, were scrupulously polite about it. The point is, however, that there is a museum attached to the Manuhia Palace where an exhibition homecoming will display them. They're on a 3-year loan. Since they're so valuable to the Ashantis, then it only makes sense to make that loan permanent, I would have thought. After all, I mean, they are one small item in the British
I wonder
Museum.
if all loans might become permanent, though. I do wonder how, how much of a loan is.
Not giving it back.
Whether it is just giving back permanently. Thank you so much for that well-mannered debate. Very lively. Royal commentator Richard Fitzwilliams, thank you very much. And the former Labour Minister Dennis McShane, of course. Great to speak to you both. Good stuff. You just want to keep everything.
Of course I do.
You don't want to hand back
anything.
We've gone out and got them. We're not going to get them back. We can look after them here. You know, I'm sorry, but them's the rules. Finders keepers or stealers keepers.
Let us know what your thoughts. Are you Team Dennis, Team Richard, Team Patrick?
Not bowing before a Ghanaian king and handing him back a bit of gold. They can jog on.
You'd bow before the Ghanaian king.
Not if I was giving him back some gold, I wouldn't. Anyway, coming up. Go on, what we got?
You can rip it out of my hands.
Cold, dead hands.
Suella Braverman be back? Many right-wing MPs think her return to cabinet could be Sunak's saving grace. I mean, could that be true, or is that all a bit bonkers at this stage? Stay with us.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News with Dubes & Co from 6, followed by Farage at 7. At 8, Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg addresses the state of the nation. And at 9, join Patrick Christie's Tonight, followed by Headliners at 11. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Free Speech Nation. Sunday nights from 7 p.m.
So J. Cole, who is a rapper, says he felt terrible after releasing a song aimed at fellow rapper Kendrick Lamar and vowed to pull the track off streaming services. He said, "I ain't gonna lie to y'all. The past 2 days felt terrible," he told an audience at the Dreamville Festival in North Carolina. "I damn near had a relapse," he said.
There's a lot of young people, especially, you know, that would look at that and they will take it not just as entertainment.
It doesn't happen in any other form of art that I can think of. This is not happening in country music, is it?
Well, it's the same. It's the same problem in both cases, isn't it? Who's doing the regulating? And surely it's each case on its merits, isn't it? You don't just ban a genre.
Why is there such a lot of hatred for a man who usually would have trash talked back? To stand up and say, you know, this doesn't sit well with me and I love this guy. If we look at, I think his name was Cody Fisher, the semi-professional footballer who died in a club because someone stabbed him. Now, he was stabbed because he stepped on someone's trainers. This is the level of ego we're seeing from a lot of young men who don't have any output of being able to channel that energy, and a lot of it is stemming from cultures like football, hip-hop, these sorts of things. So I'm just saying it's refreshing to see a man who could have easily wiped the floor with his lyrics say, I don't have to, you know?
That is interesting, isn't it? Because I took this interview in the wrong direction. It's not about pointing out the areas of concern. Actually, this story is saying, look, music and art can be giving you an example of how to live a slightly better life.
That's free speech. Saying, sorry. I'm sorry, I choose not to fight back because I love you. It may look like a wimpy thing to do, but it's still free speech.
You know what? I love you, Paul. Sorry about earlier.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Good Afternoon Britain with Emily Carver and me, Patrick Christie's. Now, Suella Braverman has called on Prime Minister Rishi Sunak to own the poor election results for the Conservatives in England's local elections.
Yes, the former Home Secretary has called on the Prime Minister to fix this. Well, perhaps easier said than done, but we're going to be getting a Labour perspective on this, if he's ready, on these remarks from the Home Secretary. I mean, probably not awfully helpful from Rishi Sunak's perspective, but does she reflect the view of many Conservative voters, many potential Conservative voters anyway, or
She's made
Conservative Party members?
Some astonishing claims, hasn't she? Saying, oh, the Tories, I mean, she's presumably not being literal about this, but saying, oh, the Tories would be lucky to get any MPs at the next election. She's also saying that she regrets backing Rishi Sunak to become Prime Minister because he has reneged on a load of promises, the ECHR, getting down legal migration. A lot of people on Your Say, so gbnews.com/Your Say, are saying, oh, if Suella Braverman was in charge, we'd be more inclined to vote Conservative. It's this really squishy moment at the moment, isn't it, with do they have time to replace Rishi Sunak, and if you are more inclined towards the right of the Conservative Party, install somebody like Suella Braverman, or does Suella Braverman keep her powder dry, let Rishi Sunak get the kind of kicking that many people assume he is going to get, and then try and mop up afterwards? But we do have...
I mean, she says Tory voters are on strike, and there might be quite a lot of truth to that. People just staying at home, not voting for Labour necessarily, but staying at home because they don't want to vote Conservative. Should we speak to the former editor of Labour List, Peter Edwards, to get his hot take on all of this? Peter, Suella Braverman coming out very clearly to say Rishi Sunak is not doing a good job and that he needs to desperately change tack. Do you think that if Rishi Sunak went more in Suella Braverman's direction, he'd garner more votes?
No, and there's no appetite for that at all among the public. There might be some appetite for that among parts of the Tory party only, but the Conservatives have only really won from the middle ground, and it's probably a cliche, you're fed up with me saying it, but urging the Tories to become UKIP or reform is not the answer. And I think Suella Braverman, you know, I disagree with her on most things, but 2 or 3 years ago, she was a credible figure, and I think she's just burnt through that credibility to damage her own party and the Prime Minister and her prospects in the leadership contest, which she thinks is going to follow.
Can I just ask you, though, I mean, isn't being more like reform literally the answer? Because we are seeing people voting for reform who used to vote Conservative. There were numerous different council seats around the country on Thursday or Friday, whenever those elections were, it's a blur now, where you could see that, so like 18% down in the Tory vote, and then reform from a standing start getting 18%. And there's quite a few examples very similar to that, which does imply if the Conservatives were more like reform, then more people would vote for them.
Well, they would gain some votes in their right flank and lose some in the centre ground. And you have to remember the number of elected MPs for reform for the House of Commons is 0. There was 1 defection. The number of UKIP was its predecessor. The number of UKIP MPs directly elected to the Commons reached a high point of 2 and then went down to 0. You know, I completely understand there's a debate in the Tory party, especially when they're 10 to 20 points behind the polls. But national elections, and this wasn't a national election because we weren't voting in Scotland, but national elections, reform and its predecessor UKIP don't cut through. The exception is obviously the referendum.
Her focus point is immigration. I mean, former Home Secretary, that is what she seems to be most passionate about, getting those numbers down, stopping illegal immigration. The Labour Party are going to have to deal with exactly the same problem if they get into power. They say they're going to be tough, but then we don't see much in the way of policy. They say they will scrap the Rwanda scheme even if it does start to work as a deterrent. They say they want to smash the gangs. Well, that's something the current government are trying to do as well, with help from the French and other European countries. So people don't really know what they're voting for when it comes to home affairs if they vote Labour, and Labour are going to be faced with exactly the same problems that Suella Braverman, at least, was trying to get to grips with.
Well, Suella Braverman made a brief attempt at getting to grips with them. And remember, first time she was Home Secretary, she had to leave office because of misconduct over government emails. And second time, under Rishi Sunak, she just wrote article after article, more and more crude and aggressive in its rhetoric, and eventually he got rid of her. You're completely right. Whoever wins the election is going to have to deal with the state of the immigration system and legitimate public concern over it. Labour's got a 5-point plan, and it's interesting the government is starting to pick up 1 or 2 bits of that plan.
What, like what?
Well, closer cooperation with France. I think Labour demanded about 3 or 4 years ago. Now it seems to be happening.
Well, hang on, we've been giving tens of millions to France for years.
£500 million to France, some of which I revealed on my evening show. They actually spent on putting a fence around a football stadium, which had illegal migrants camping in it, which had nothing to do with Britain. And they're going to remove their police officers from the beach so they can go and safeguard the Paris Olympics. I mean, it's all very well and good saying closer cooperation with France, but the French are saying no, aren't they?
Well, I think they're saying we and then showing incompetence, and I don't know the French for that. But you're making a very articulate case for government incompetence, but I don't think there's anyone who thinks we can solve the migrant crisis while ignoring France.
Well, hang on, you just said we need French cooperation, but they're useless and incompetent. I mean, then, there's no use in French cooperation then, is there?
We certainly need French cooperation. Patrick made the case for their incompetence, and it points to value for money, doesn't it? I think both main parties now agree we need cooperation with France. But as Patrick set out, it's not really borne fruit so far, has it?
Well, yeah, all right, but we're not getting around the thing that Labour are going to be in exactly the same situation. Can we just hear quickly from Suella Braverman, and then we'll just react off the back of it. So here is Suella.
Minister is going to be leading us into the next general election, whether we like it or not. What he needs to do to salvage this dire situation is to accept the enormity of the problem, these terrible results, and quickly and urgently change course. So make sure that there are meaningful tax cuts that people can feel and benefit from. Put a cap on legal migration. Take us out of the European...
Yeah, OK, we should obviously say take us out of the ECHR as well. I mean, Peter, if he did do that, I think he would go up in the polls, no?
It might get a short-term bounce. You know, I've done a lot of campaigning for Labour in London, these local elections. I can tell you that the European Convention on Human Rights never came up on the doorstep. I also haven't seen any polls.
But does deporting foreign criminals or stopping illegal migration come up? Because, yes, people might not talk about the ECHR as an institution.
But you don't need to leave the ECHR to do those things.
But they might talk about issues that have maybe been, you know, hindered, perhaps, by our membership of the ECHR.
Well, I don't think deporting foreign criminals is held back by the ECHR. And by the way, Suella Braverman keeps referring to it as a foreign court. It's a court that the United Kingdom was involved in setting up. You know, the last two governments, whether you like them or not, Tories and Labour, have deported foreign criminals to varying degrees. So we can do it. Pulling out of the ECHR, I'm sorry, it's just a sop to reform voters.
Well, we shall see. Thank you very much indeed, Peter Edwards. Always great to speak to you, former editor of Labour List. Good stuff.
Just quickly on that, Suella Braverman, while she was still Home Secretary, stood up and gave a speech, OK, where she was in Washington and she said that we are going to see a hurricane of illegal migrants coming through, and unless we change as an international community the definition of what it means to be a refugee or an asylum seeker, then essentially Western civilization is doomed. And I'm convinced that she's on the right side of history when it comes to that, because that's what's happening.
I remember all the media coverage focused on her, you know, specific words she may have used rather than, you know...
The problem.
The general, rather than the problem itself, yes. And I'd say most Labour and Conservative voters are concerned about our borders and how porous they've become. It's not a left-right issue, or it shouldn't be so much. And
look how concerned the Irish are now.
Yeah, wow.
It's taken... You know, why do things have to get awful before people respond? Anyway, we're waffling on.
It's politics, isn't it? That's politics. Coming up, we're going to be talking a little bit more about those local election results. Lots of councillors won on a pro-Gaza ticket. What does that say about the state of our democracy? What exactly is going on there? And e-bikes. We've got another man on to talk about how e-bikes are exploding across the country.
Yeah, not very green, is it? But we'll see after the headlines.
It's 1:36. I'm Aaron Armstrong. Rishi Sunak's conceded for the first time the Tories may not win the next general election. The Prime Minister believes Britain's heading for a hung parliament, with Labour falling short of being able to form a majority government. And he says the public wouldn't want a coalition with the SNP. While Sunak has described the local election results as bitterly disappointing, the Conservatives lost nearly 500 council seats and also the mayor's position in the West Midlands. The PM's urging his MPs to end divisions and come together to take on Labour. John Swinney's been confirmed as the new leader of the SNP. Nominations for the job closed at midday and he was unopposed in the race to replace Humza Yousaf after veteran party activist Graham McCormick pulled out late last night. Mr Swinney is due to be sworn in as Scotland's new First Minister later this week. Could your local be on the verge of reopening? Heineken says it's going to invest almost £40 million to create 1,000 new jobs and crucially bring back 62 pubs that have closed this year. The Dutch company says it hopes to transform hundreds of tired establishments into premium locals. And gun salutes have rung out across the capital, marking the first anniversary of King Charles' coronation. Well, a 62 gun salute rung out from Tower Wharf. Earlier, that came after 41 volleys were heard. They were fired by the King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery in Green Park. The Archbishop of Canterbury has paid tribute to the King's sense of duty after his return to public life following his cancer diagnosis, and says crowning the King was a privilege of a lifetime. GB News alerts are available. You can scan the QR code on your screen to get them, or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News forecast. Through Bank Holiday Monday, it's rather wet. There'll be some heavy, thundery showers in places, but there will be some warm sunshine. That's thanks to an area of low pressure, but it's all changed through the week ahead. High pressure is going to build in for much of the country, bringing some dry weather with some warm spells of sunshine. Back to the rest of Bank Holiday Monday, some heavy downpours across southeast England that could lead to some local disruption. Elsewhere, sunny spells and scattered heavy showers, some slow moving, hail and thunder in there too. Met Office warnings in force. Cloudier and drier for Northern Ireland, Northern Scotland. In the sunshine, temperatures again approaching 19 or 20 Celsius. Under the cloud, around 14 or 15 degrees. Thunderstorms start to ease through the evening time. Still some rain affecting southeast England, which could be heavy at times, but into the early hours it gradually pulls away. Overnight it's largely dry. There could be some drizzle in the thicker clouds, some low cloud mist and murk developing as well. Temperatures generally holding up well above freezing, but a grey start to Tuesday. Low cloud mist and fog slowly lifting and breaking, and then through the day, yes, there'll be quite a lot of cloud, but it will brighten up as the day goes on. There will be some sunny spells that develop, but where the sunshine develops, particularly in the south, we could again see some heavy showers developing here. Temperatures approaching 20 Celsius, further north around the mid-teens.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Russell Holding. On the M62 in Cheshire, there's a lane closed where a car caught fire on the eastbound exit at junction 10 for the southbound M6 at the Croft interchange, causing delays. In Norfolk, the A11 is partly blocked southbound at Thetford, causing queues. Buses replaced trains between Leamington Spa and Nuneaton, between Bedford and Bletchley, and between Watford Junction and St Albans Abbey because of an overtime ban. In London, the high road in Tottenham is closed off White Hart Lane for an investigation, with delays on approaches to there. In West Sussex, the A286 is closed at Fernhurst after an accident, and in East Sussex, the A21 is closed each way between the Cripps Corner turnoff and Johns Cross roundabout after an accident causing delays, and the A21's closed southbound along London Road at St Leonards-on-Sea for emergency repairs. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
It's 1:41. You're watching and listening to Good Afternoon Britain. Now, e-bikes. They've been blamed for surging numbers of battery fires in London and other parts of the country. Fire chiefs are warning against plans to legalise the more powerful models because of this risk.
Yeah, well, so 149 fires were caused in London alone by e-bikes in 2023. Now, just bear in mind these things are supposed to be the new greener alternative to driving, aren't they? I mean, that doesn't look particularly green. In fact, it is a towering inferno. Joining us now to discuss this growing problem is motoring journalist Danny Kelly. Danny, look, we can all see this footage, can't we, of exploding e-bikes and, in some ways, have a bit of a laugh about the dramatic footage. But someone could have been on that e-bike, or a child in a pram could be next to it. I don't know if they're that safe, are they?
149 fires, as you mentioned, in 2023. 3 people, unfortunately, dying in 2023. Over 40-odd fires this year. London Fire Service saying that it's the most common cause of call-outs now in the whole of the capital. And the problem is, guys, is that you're probably using incorrect equipment, charging equipment, moody gear coming over from the Far East, from China, being sold by unreputable dealers online. The current legislation is that it can go no more than 15.5 miles an hour, and the battery capacity is 250 watts. But it's easy to de-restrict the 250 watt and 15.5 mile an hour speed limit. Whenever I come down to London, I regularly am overtaken on 20-mile-an-hour stretches by e-bikes. Now, there is a law against it, but the Metropolitan Police, they're going to struggle to keep up with knife crime, never mind pulling people over if they're going over 15.5 miles an hour. And what we're seeing on our screens now is rather dramatic footage, CCTV footage of these e-bikes literally exploding, and it's a chemical reaction. It's like a little mini power plant. Lithium is a chemical, and it's very difficult to put these things out. And you mentioned, Patrick, I think it's a bit of a fallacy that people are using these e-bikes instead of internal combustion engine vehicles. I think that's a load of garbage. The type of characters I see streaming around the capital at 30 miles an hour on an e-bike certainly aren't the type of people who are thinking of the environment.
You think it's wrong-uns using these bikes? So it's basically the dodgy bikes that are doing this, or people have started to try and play around with how fast they can go, play around with the battery and all of that. So it's actually people making these products more dangerous, either because the supplier is a bit dodgy, or they're actually doing some DIY themselves.
Yeah, Emily, you'll be amazed. Just a simple search online for about £3,000 or £4,000, which I know is a significant amount of money. You can actually buy an e-bike with 40 times the legal capacity. There's a disclaimer on the internet website saying that it's for off-road use, but that, that's just a legal disclaimer. And guess how fast it can go? It can go over 80 miles an hour.
80 miles an hour?
Yeah, it can go over 80 miles an hour. And for pedestrians, they're lethal because you're walking along the pavement and you just get a whoosh of air as some scallywag goes past you at 30. There was a woman who was killed by a pedal cycle. He was doing 29 miles an hour. The police couldn't prosecute him because the speeding law doesn't apply to bikes. And, cyclists, normal cyclists don't like him, pedestrians don't like him, car drivers don't like him. And generally, they are a ticking time bomb. And like our mobile phones, we go to sleep and we charge our phone overnight. And that's what the London Fire Service don't want people to do. People are leaving their bikes and their e-scooters on charge overnight. Moody charging gear, damaged batteries, and then, as we can see on our screen now, it's a towering
and this is if people are watching this now, this is absolutely not a London problem. It just happens to be that we've got this data from London. And if you do have an e-bike, or if you do know someone with it, you are right to be concerned if they've got that lying around in a shared hallway or in the shed or charging overnight. You are right to be concerned about it. I also just think that there is a fundamental fallacy, Danny, when it comes to some of these e-bikes, the minerals that they use, lithium batteries you mentioned there. You see the way that some of these things are mined out of the ground by a one-armed Congolese orphan somewhere, and you think there is nothing particularly green about this, is there?
No, there's not. And I don't think that we should focus too much. And you and I are right to distance this from the green agenda, Patrick, because it's not. That green agenda, activists often use this as a reason to push e-scooters in city centres. Paris recently, I think, banned e-scooters because they're just so dangerous. But of course, Paris was convinced that it was the right thing to do because they were, if you like, they were strong-armed by the green activists. So I think, predominantly speaking, I think most e-bikes are used for genuine reasons, for genuine people who maybe struggle to get up hills because they're out of shape, like me, for example. But a lot of the e-bikes, let's not kid ourselves, they're used to go over 15.5 miles an hour. They scream around city centres. In the Midlands, Coventry, Birmingham, Wolverhampton, you're right, it's not a London thing. But the story today is a London thing because the London Fire Service is so scared of it. It's the most common cause of house fire. It's crazy. 3 people died last year.
Of course, that, if you get your e-bike from a reputable supplier and you don't start fiddling with, the battery and everything else, then it's safe. It's just these dodgy ones that we need to keep an eye on. So there's the warning. Thank you very much, Danny. Danny Kelly, motoring journalist.
Have a great bank holiday.
Always great. Thank you very much. You too. Yes. Well, don't get me started on the line bikes. Basically, people cycling. A friend of mine, someone on a bike, just grabs her phone out of her hand. 8:30 in the morning. Not what you expect, is it, when you're on your way to work?
Mobile mugging machines.
Well, perhaps it is what you expect these days.
Yeah, indeed. I do want to stress, Jenny, look, the vast majority of these e-bikes are perfectly legal and above board. You've got nothing to worry about. But it is the knockoff ones, and they are everywhere. So, there is a bit of concern.
Don't fiddle around with it so that it goes 80 miles per hour. That might be a good idea. Anyway, coming up, take a listen to this.
We received some information regarding a bomb threat.
Oof, terrifying. A terrifying extract from a British Airways flight from Bermuda to London. You might have missed it there. It happened very quickly. There's a bomb threat. We'll be bringing to you that full story and the full audio clip of the pilot. I don't know how I'd react, but I don't think I'd be as calm as that chap.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio, and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to Scotland, home of Hamza Yousaf's hate crime law, aka the Clype's Charter.
Clype, a delightfully Scottish word for a grass, a snitch, or in the context of Russell Finley's opening gambit during the hate crime debate at Holyrood last week, reporting your friends, family and neighbours to the police for alleged hate crimes. The SNP responded by doubling down on the new law's ability to protect vulnerable victims.
I am confident that we have robust legislation that will protect those who are vulnerable to harm.
But other victims are emerging in the wake of this new legislation. As the bill moved through Parliament, concerns rose of police inundated with vexatious complaints, targeting individuals who had committed no crimes. The first fortnight of the new law gave rise to nearly 9,000 complaints.
The vast majority, at least 95%, have been deemed not to be crimes.
False reporting is nothing new. A social post from Scottish Conservative Murdo Fraser was flagged by a trans rights activist in November.
Police decided that no crime had been committed, but nevertheless that was recorded as a non-crime hate incident.
And Alba Westminster leader Neil Hanvey says he too has been targeted under pre-existing legislation.
I've been the victim of at least one of those complaints, and that's taken up the time of police officers.
Thick skin can be expected of our elected officials, but what about the public? 74-year-old Morag McDougall-Brown says she was reported to police by a neighbour, and the experience has taken its toll.
I hate to think that anybody like me or similar to my age would ever have to go through this, because I really don't think I will ever go over it.
Right, good afternoon, Britain. Now, passengers on a British Airways flight were forced to disembark before takeoff at Bermuda's main international airport after a bomb threat. It is now being confirmed.
So the flight, which was supposed to leave for London last night, had to be immediately evacuated after the threat was received. I believe we can have a little listen now as to what happened.
Bermuda Tower, cancel takeoff clearance, cancel takeoff clearance. We received some information regarding a bomb threat.
Okay, cancel takeoff clearance, Seabird 18 Bravo, and would you like us to leave the runway?
Seabird 18 Bravo, negative, hold position, standby.
Seabird 18 Bravo, you got any further information for us?
Seabird 18 Bravo, I was just on the phone with the airport duty officer, and they reported that they received an email saying that there is a bomb on board, and we are currently working on getting the authorities out and getting it to an isolated area to disembark, possibly.
Wow.
It was all very matter of fact, wasn't it? Cool as a cucumber.
Fair play to the guy. If someone told me there's a bomb threat in this studio, obviously I'd you know, I have to
take cover.
Carry you out of here. But then after that, I'd go. Once my kind of gentlemanly duties are out of the way, I'd be absolutely bricking it.
Screaming and shouting.
Screaming and shouting, yeah, getting away.
Crying a little.
Crying, weeping, just in a puddle of myself in the corner. There's a bomb threat here. But yeah, fair play to the guy. I mean, can you imagine that? Sitting on an aeroplane thinking any moment now this thing might blow up. Bermuda also doesn't need any help, does it, when it comes to the old flying concerns? With the Bermuda Triangle and all of that.
No, exactly. But we should say that everyone is safe now. They were all successfully evacuated, and no one's come to any harm.
No,
as we know. But just it's very interesting just hearing how they deal with that at that moment of being told that there's a bomb threat.
I like that. Probably don't get that on Ryanair, do you?
Probably not.
You just see the pilot clambering. Is that the pilot there walking off the tarmac? What's going on? And you just left. Anyway, look, we've got...
We're not going to get into trouble, probably, because the Ryanair boss would say the same.
Yeah, and also we flew Ryanair, so it doesn't really matter. Now, OK, look, just going to go to a couple of your views here. Lots of reaction to the e-bikes, but also lots of reaction to Suella Braverman saying that basically Rishi Sunak needs to buck his ideas up and quick. Politicians were afraid to speak on the subject of migration, and some will still call others for bringing the migration crisis up. It's disgraceful. Devious MPs, says KG in Cumbria. There's quite a lot of that doing the rounds at the moment.
Mark says, brutal. He says, we're never going to get a decent government running this country because the majority of the British public are clueless.
Well, there we go.
And they have no interest. We deserve what we get.
Well, this ties into what we're going to be talking about when we come back. As I'm sure you've seen, some incredibly fruity characters have just been elected at the local elections. The Muslim voters issued 18 demands to Keir Starmer's Labour Party. Should he listen? How concerned should we be about some very, very concerning individuals being elected now in the local council? Stay tuned.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather. It starts to settle down over the next 24 hours after today's heavy rain, but there will be some fog patches, particularly at night, and that's thanks to an area of high pressure. Low pressure moves out the way, high pressure moves in for the week ahead, largely settling it down. Some weather fronts across the northwest at times bringing some rain. This evening time, still some rumbles of thunder, some heavy rain in places, but it does slowly ease as we head towards midnight and into the early hours. The rain just taking its time to clear the far southeast, but generally dry overnight, some splashes of light rain in places, but a lot of cloud, some low cloud too, making it murky over the hills and around the coasts. Temperatures largely remaining in double figures. So it means a grey start to Tuesday morning, some hill fog in places, but as we go through the morning into the afternoon, should lift and break to allow some brighter skies to develop, some sunny spells, particularly across the south and the west. But where we get some sunny spells, it will help trigger a few showers, not as heavy compared to today, but some of them could be on the sharp side. Fewer in between as well, so many places dry with sunny spells. Temperatures again reaching 19 or 20 Celsius in the best of the sunshine. For Wednesday, a murky start again, some fog patches in places, but slowly lifting and breaking, allowing some dry weather and bright weather to develop. Similar for Thursday and Friday as that high pressure builds in, temperatures begin to rise as well.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The next Great British Giveaway winner could be you, with a massive £20,000 in tax-free cash to be won. Imagine how you'd react getting that winning call from us.
Hi, my name's Phil Cox, and I won the Great British Giveaway. I'd say, why not? What is it? The price of a text and £2 to enter. And if I can win it, anybody can win it. And they're going to get even more money this time round, so why wouldn't you go in the draw?
For another chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05, PO Box 8690, Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News.
Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News with Dubes & Co from 6, followed by Farage at 7. At 8, Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg addresses the state of the nation. And at 9, join Patrick Christie's Tonight, followed by Headliners at 11. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
Well, good afternoon, Britain. It's 2 o'clock on Monday, the 6th of May.
Wow. Local election fallout as pro-Gaza candidates sweep to power in former Labour strongholds. Can these results provide a clue of the future of British politics? And how concerning is it?
And Irish tent cities, migrants take over Dublin and the row grows at the border. Can Britain and Ireland find a settlement to this ongoing crisis?
And it's the Coronation anniversary as gun salutes sound around the capital and Edinburgh and Cardiff and Northern Ireland as well to mark 1 year since the King's coronation. We will have the very latest on how well Charles III's first year has gone.
Well, I think by now we know that it was a good set of elections for the Labour Party overall, but there were some standout results that prove that Keir Starmer has a little bit of a problem.
Yeah.
Take Oldham Council, for example. Labour lost many votes to independent candidates, and lots of candidates, dozens of councillors, were running on what seemed to be, or at least dominated by, a ticket based on the Gaza conflict.
Yeah, but it goes further.
In Gaza, and as we saw, a Green councillor in Leeds City Council, he won, and he shouted, Allahu Akbar.
Yeah,
this is for Palestine.
as you do.
This is for Palestine. He had a green rosette and a Palestine flag.
Yeah, some footage as well of Burnley where they got the horses out and were playing tribal traditional music there. Again, very normal behaviour that in Burnley at a local council election. This was immediately followed up by a list of 18 demands from the Muslim vote, which includes things apparently like Sharia pensions for people. Again, this actually isn't just about Gaza, is it? When you dig into it, Sharia pensions haven't really got anything to do with Gaza, have they? Doing away with Michael Gove's definition of extremism, don't think that's got much to do with Gaza, has it? A lot of people, for a very long time, have been very concerned about the slow creeping hand of religion, of the Islamic faith, being involved in our politics in this country. Now, some people will say there's no need to be concerned about this. It's wrong to be concerned about this. Fair enough. A lot of people are worried about it, and like it or not, it is now happening, isn't it?
Yes. Well, get your views in. gbnews.com/your say. We're going to get a little bit more analysis on this and what these results mean. What do these results mean? What will Keir Starmer do? There are these demands telling him what he needs to change when it comes to his manifesto. Will he implement any of them, or will he just ignore it?
We'll be playing you some of the best clips as well, by the way, of some, very fruity characters winning a local election ward as though they have just won Parliament and that they are, now going to change the world, which is amazing, isn't it? Because I imagine there are a few potholes and bins that need taking out in their local constituency, but no, of course, it is all for Gaza. gbnews.com/your say.
It's your headlines.
Very good afternoon to you. 3 minutes past 2. I'm Aaron Armstrong. John Swinney says he's deeply honoured to have become the new leader of the SNP. Nominations for the job closed at midday and he was unopposed in the race to replace Humza Yousaf after veteran party activist Graham McCormick pulled out of the race late last night. Mr Swinney is expected to be voted in as Scotland's First Minister at Holyrood later this week. Rishi Sunak has called for unity amongst his MPs after conceding for the first time the Tories may not win the general election. The Prime Minister believes Britain's heading for a hung parliament, with Labour falling short of enough seats to form a majority government. He says the public wouldn't want a coalition with the SNP. Well, the Conservatives lost nearly 500 council seats and the West Midlands mayoralty, results Rishi Sunak has described as bitterly disappointing. Women's Minister Maria Caulfield, though, told GB News things aren't as bad as the polls suggest.
4 months now they've been saying that we're 20 points behind Labour, and actually when you look at the results from the local elections, and experts have done the drilling down on those numbers, it's between 7 to 9 points, and what we're actually looking for is a potential hung parliament, and if Labour then want to go into government, they would have to do deals with parties like the SNP, the Lib Dems, and parties like the Green Party as well.
Labour chair Annalise Dodds says Rishi Sunak's interpretation of the results is incorrect.
Local elections are not a good predictor of general elections if you just look at the overall vote share, which is what he seems to have done. For example, very small parties tend to do far better in local elections. Independents tend to do better. And if you look at the places where Labour won, where Labour picked up support, it was in those constituencies that Labour will need in order to deliver a majority Labour government. So I'm afraid Rishi Sunak has got this wrong. He's tin-eared. He should be listening to that message to actually give people the chance for change.
The police have launched a murder investigation after a man was stabbed in a street fight in East London on Sunday. A 38-year-old man was found to have suffered a single stab injury just off a busy high road in Bethnal Green. Scotland Yard says officers are still working to inform the victim's family, with formal identification yet to take place. Ukraine's accused Russia of nuclear blackmail after Vladimir Putin ordered the testing of its tactical weapons during military drills. The Kremlin says the nuclear tests are in response to statements from the West about sending troops to Ukraine. Emmanuel Macron suggested France could deploy its soldiers to the battlefield, and last week Foreign Secretary David Cameron said Ukraine had the right to strike inside Russia with weapons supplied by Britain. Moscow says those comments have risked pushing the nuclear-armed world towards a global catastrophe. 4 men have been charged after £40 million worth of cocaine was found in a pub car park. Around 500 kilograms of the drug was discovered in the back of a van in Lely, East Yorkshire. A Colombian national and 3 men from Argyll and Bute in Scotland were arrested on Saturday. They've been charged with the importation of Class A drugs. Rail passengers are facing a week of disruption because of a fresh set of strikes by train drivers. Members of the ASLEF union at 16 operators have launched a 6-day ban on overtime. That is expected to cause cancellations at short notice. They'll also stage 3 one-day strikes across a number of operators from tomorrow until Thursday. It's all part of this long-running dispute over pay. No talks have been held between the union and the train operators for more than a year. Gun salutes have rung out across the capital, marking the first anniversary of King Charles' coronation. A 62-gun salute rang out from Tower Wharf. Earlier, 41 volleys were fired by the King's Troop Horse Artillery in Green Park in central London. The Archbishop of Canterbury has paid tribute to the King's sense of duty after his return to public life and says crowning him was the privilege of a lifetime. And Heineken plans to reopen 62 pubs that closed earlier this year. The Dutch company says the investment of almost £40 million in its Star Pubs operation will create 1,000 new jobs. It says the plans to refurbish more than 600 establishments will transform them from tired pubs into premium locals. And you can sign up for GB News alerts, scan the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now back to Patrick and Emily.
Thank you very much, Aaron, and welcome back to Good Afternoon Britain with me, Patrick Christys and Emily Carver. Now, anger over Labour's position on the war in Gaza has seen the party lose a number of councillors at the local elections in an otherwise fairly strong set of results for the party. But this is actually a much bigger problem for society, isn't it?
Yes, not just for the Labour Party. You've got a Muslim pressure group now called the Muslim Vote, and they're issuing Sir Keir Starmer with a list of 18 demands. Now, these include ceasing all military ties with Israel. They include recognising a Palestinian state. They also include things like ensuring Sharia-compliant pensions are available at every workplace and removing the extremism definition that Michael Gove introduced, also issuing guidance that Muslims are allowed to pray at schools. So they've got 18 demands.
Yes, indeed. We can just play you a little clip now of an individual who was elected in Bradford and some of the things that he has to say. Tell us what you make of this.
Horton, Great Horton, Manningham, Heaton, City Ward, and Collar. I'm going to tell you something here. This is a clear message to Starmer. Bradford has rejected Labour. It's rejected Zionism. And this is a message to you, Nash Shah and Imran Hussain. We are coming for you in the general election. Anyone that stands with Zionism, we're coming after you. Free Palestine! Free Palestine!
OK, now that's not normal, is it? That's not normal, is it? Can you imagine if that was the other way around, though, seriously? So let's just imagine a world where that's Britain First or someone like that standing up and saying that kind of stuff about, I don't know, channel migrants or whatever. There would be massive outrage and massive concern in society. Where is the concern for this? He was one of many individuals. We had shouts of Allahu Akbar, didn't we? When, bizarrely, the Green Party managed to find itself infiltrated by a chap.
And these are local elections. So these people have absolutely the square root of zero influence on foreign politics. They're not running to be members of parliament, nor are they... they have no influence, but yet they've made these local elections about the issue of Gaza. What does Keir Starmer do now? What does he do? There's a clear message there, isn't there? That Starmer needs to change his position on all of this if he wants to keep some of the votes in some of these areas of the country. Should we discuss this a bit with Professor Paul Waitley from the Department of Government from the University of Essex? Thank you very much for joining us, Professor. Paul, we've seen dozens of councillors elected on a pro-Gaza ticket, an anti-Israel ticket, a pro-ceasefire ticket, a pro-Palestinian state ticket. How does Keir Starmer react to this? What does he do?
Well, to put it in context, the last census in 2021 showed that the population in the UK, about 6.5% of the population in the UK is Muslim. And they're concentrated in pretty urban centres. And the top 20 constituencies with Muslim voters in them are all Labour. Now, in fact, most of them are very strong Labour, high percentage of marginals lack those kinds of Muslim voters. So from Labour's point of view, it's a mixed message. On the one hand, if Muslim voters are very strongly concentrating on the Gaza issue, they're doing it in constituencies which Labour can probably win without their help. But on the other hand, if this issue spreads And my goodness, it's spread in the United States on the campuses. We haven't seen it on campuses in Britain yet, but it could do.
Well, we have. Just sorry to interrupt, Paul, and it's fair, absolutely fair enough if you've missed this, because I think it's just started / is just happening. But apparently it has started now in Oxford and Cambridge. There are tent sit-ins. The winter of, or the summer of discontent is upon us, quite literally, at those universities.
Sheffield, Newcastle, Leeds, all these campuses.
But I take your point, yes, but sorry, carry on, as you were.
Yeah. Well, thanks for upgrading me on that. But point being, you know, there's a copycat thing going on with the United States. Now, in the United States, as we know, it's got quite violent. There was a big riot, in effect, at UCLA, University in Los Angeles. And if it develops here, that means the issue is spreading well beyond the Muslim community. And Labour requires and depends on a high level of support from young voters in the party. Now, we know from the polling that young voters are more sympathetic to the Palestinian side and what's happening in Gaza than older voters. So if the educated young people who are aware of this, I mean, a lot of young people aren't, and, you know, it's not on their radar, but if the educated young people start mobilising, they won't, I think they won't vote Conservative at the next election, but they might well stay at home and not vote at all.
I mean, you say educated young people, but I guess it depends in what way you're educated and whether you... Because when speaking to some of these students who are out on these protests, they know very little about the conflict, and they don't really know the meaning of some of the slogans they might be standing behind or indeed shouting. I mean, if you ask some students what does from the river to the sea mean, for example, they don't know which river and they don't know which sea.
Yeah, I just wonder what can I ask you a bit, sorry, about the independents, right? Because this is the other aspect to this, right? Which is that, you know, people might stand as independents. This very same group, the muslimvote.co.uk, which is issuing Starmer with a list of 18 demands, they've got candidates, although, you know, independent candidates. For example, in Bethnal Green, they've got the former lawyer to Shamima Begum, and that is quite a winnable seat for them because it's, off the top of my head, it's something like 41% Muslim. And the Labour MP there did not back a ceasefire. So they're going for that. So they could win that seat. Could we see a rise of the independent candidate, do you think? George Galloway-esque in a way?
Well, it's easier for independents, as your earlier speaker was saying, in local elections than it is in general elections. The first-past-the-post system punishes independent candidates, and it also punishes, of course, candidates from small parties. It's unlikely, not impossible, it's unlikely, for instance, that Reform won't get any seats in the next election, although it probably will have thousands of voters. So that's an example of how the Westminster system makes it hard for a newly formed party or independents to get a hold. Most independents in Parliament in the past are independents because they've been chucked out of their party. So not that they were elected as independents, if you know what I mean. So that is a big barrier to an operation like this.
I mean, have we seen local elections dominated by foreign conflicts in this way before?
It's unusual. And, well, think about local elections as being a combination, from the point of view of voters, of concerns about local issues, potholes, housing, and all these things, which are very important to locals, but also they've got a national dimension. The two are mixed in together. Whereas a by-election for the House of Commons or a general election, it's focused on national issues. The focus on national issues is much greater than any local issues, although one or two people might vote nationally on a local, a local protest or something.
I mean, Paul, sorry to interrupt you, Paul. I just want to show a clip that's been doing the rounds of a Green councillor who won up in Leeds, and this was his response to winning.
We will not be silent. We will raise the voice of Gaza. We will raise the voice of Palestine. Allahu Akbar!
OK, so We are seeing that. We are seeing the rise of quite strong pro-Palestine views in politics. We are also seeing now, for the first time officially, a group of politicised members of the Muslim community making a series of demands to the Labour leader. How concerned, if you look at the demographics and the way that Britain is going forward, OK, how concerned should the people of Britain be about the Islamic faith becoming more prominent in British politics?
Well, the answer to that is, as I said at the beginning, 6.5% of the population in the census, that's everybody, covers everybody, said they were Muslims. So there's more Muslims than Jewish voters. But in terms of the wider population, they are a significant minority. Growing, I agree, but a significant minority.
What about their presence in politics, though, Paul? That's the thing, because for a significant minority, I think it can at times maybe seem like there is an overrepresentation of them in positions of political power, maybe, at certain times. Look at the Mayor of London, you look at, Humza Yousaf, obviously, until recently anyway, in Scotland, and we are seeing, some of these councillors as well. There maybe is a sense that for a minority of the population, there are quite a strong level of representation politically.
Well, to be a big, significant group will take a long time because population changes occur, but they're slow. So if you were talking about a significant Muslim vote, and assuming that, of course, is coherent and so on, and there are divisions among Muslims, as we know, but assuming it's coherent, it's going to be a long time before you get a Muslim identity party really making ground in local, in national elections, and to a lesser extent in local elections as well. So I think, you can overdo this. But the wider issue, which is anger throughout the world with what's happening in Gaza, does affect other people as well as Muslims. And many of these are young and on the left.
Yeah.
Labour needs them.
Absolutely.
That's a key point. It's a key point.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time, Professor Paul Whiteley. You're from the Department of Government at the University of Essex. Great to speak to you.
It's a key point, that. I think there are two reasons here, aren't there, really, why this could have a really serious effect on British politics and the landscape. If a lot of people feel incredibly energised in the British Muslim communities, trying to get into politics, you can see how many among you are desperate to become the local town councillor?
The issue is not that a Muslim has been elected to a position. I think what people are worried is about political Islam.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Becoming, something that people might vote for.
Because we've seen it reinforced.
We don't want to see lots of people don't want to see that, religious element in our politics.
We've seen it reinforced, these council things and shouts about Akbar immediately reinforced by a list of demands that, OK, some of them are related to Gaza, some of them are related to foreign policy. I can understand that. But some of them are related to things like Sharia pensions or Muslim children having a right to pray in schools, for example. And quite quickly it does become... I mean, how far away are we from, say, blasphemy laws, for example? And I think that's the kind of politicisation that people are talking about, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Let us know what you think. gbnews.com/your say. Now, we're going to be heading over to Dublin. See what's happening with this diplomatic row over migration, of course. Police near the border. Will the migrant row lead to a hard border? I mean, there have been surveys out saying lots of Irish people would like to see a bit more of a border.
Well, sure, I'm not surprised, really, given what's going on, but we're going to be picking the bones out of that one very, very shortly from the scene with our reporter over there, so make sure you stay tuned.
Britain's newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
Men's mental health. Men are starting to talk a lot more. You've been through a lot of stuff that people don't know about.
Yeah, I mean, the last few years for me have been very, very difficult. People see me on tour, performing, making music, but myself and my wife, we went through 2 miscarriages. For us, that was a very devastating time and very difficult to know how to kind of process those emotions. And I guess as a man, I did the thing of bottling up my emotions, and where I feel comfortable to be able to express myself is in the studio, whereas, you know, she had obviously a different reaction to, you know, what happened to us, because not only was it happening to her mentally, psychologically, but it was happening to her physically as well. And I think something that she really wanted to see from me was that sensitivity and that emotion. And I thought that as a man, being strong was trying to bottle up my emotions and just show her that, no, you know, that I'm being strong for her. But actually being strong is talking about it. And what's happened ever since I've started to talk about it is I've spoken to more men that have experienced baby loss. My wife forced out of me, you know, how do you feel? And I ended up as a mess on the floor. I was exasperating, crying, almost inconsolable. She was just holding me in her arms as we cried together, and we cried together. And I didn't realise I needed that release so badly. Like I said, I've been able to speak to other men, and we've been able to cry together, and they shared their own experiences, which they did similar to me. But actually, you know, as men, I feel like that conversation and that sensitivity and being able to be emotional together.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Right, it's coming up to 2:25 in the afternoon. It's your bank holiday Monday, and big question, is the Rwanda Act starting to work? Well, Irish ministers at least are pointing fingers at Rishi Sunak's government over the Prime Minister's removal policies. They say it's causing an influx of migrants into their country because they're scared of being flown to Rwanda. Is there truth to that?
Well, the spat is putting relations between the two nations under serious strain. This has been rumbling on now for a number of weeks. Joining us to discuss this is GB News' Northern Ireland reporter, Doogie Beattie. And Doogie, well, tell us where you are, what's going on and who you got with you.
Well, I'm in Dublin. There is a huge protest. Thousands of people have turned out here today to protest about immigration and the lack of infrastructure in the Republic of Ireland. Now, this row that is going on between Great Britain and the Republic of Ireland as to whether they're coming away here to flee from Rwanda or not has been ongoing for just a few weeks. But of course, we've been covering this for the last 2 years in the Republic of Ireland. In fact, it is gathering serious political ground at this minute in time, and you can see behind me the parade itself is just about to get underway, and with me is head of the Irish Freedom Party, Herman Kelly. Herman, tell us a little bit about what's happening today.
There should be well over 3,000 people here. By the time it gets down to the destination of Customs House, the last time there was between 5,000 and 7,000. A very clear message: one, that Ireland is full; two, that you should house the Irish first, and actually an unusual chant for a crowd of thousands of people flying Irish tricolours was that Sinn Féin are traitors. That's a new thing for Irish politics. It's very new. That would never have happened 2 years ago. So people now have the confidence. I think Sinn Féin have been exposed as an open borders, mass immigration party, and now that leaves room for a nationalist party like the Irish Freedom Party, which believes in democratic self-determination for the Irish people, which they have impressed. They believe in the EU membership, subservience to the European Union, and we're opposed to all that.
Well, of course, they'd object to that, and they're not here at this minute in time to object to it. But I mean, this row that is going on across the border, and Rishi Sunak offered them to join the Rwanda plan, the scheme. Do you think they should have?
Of course they should have, but they can't. They said so, they cannot, because they're members of the EU, and like, for example, trade policy is set completely by the European Union, and they want to be, now, they do have an opt-out, because the Treaty of Amsterdam, Ireland has an opt-out on justice and home affairs, so they can say no to the EU Migration Pact, for example, but because they want to be the best boys in the class and get a pat in the head from the real masters in Brussels, they would never say no to Brussels. So they are happy to accept these open borders. And you know what? Irish people have to understand that in matters of EU competence, EU law is superior to Irish law, the Irish Supreme Court and the Irish Constitution, and that is not that is not an Irish Republic. That is not a democratic Irish Republic at all.
Well, there you go, Patrick, and it sounds very like some of the political arguments that we are having back in the UK, because they're all saying, well, European law is overruling exactly the Irish law, and it is relevant to EU and not to the rest of Ireland. So that row will rumble on. This is really gathering some steam here in Ireland over these past couple of years, and that's because, I mean, I even spoke to one man earlier on that was looking his shoulder sorted out on the health service, and he can't have it sorted out because he's 3 months short of his credits of retirement. He's saying it's awful. Every hospital they go into is absolutely bunged, and of course this is what happens when you have a non-contributory welfare system. That's why migrants are heading to Great Britain and indeed Ireland, north and south.
Doogie, just while we've got you, if that's all right, because I mean, it's such powerful shots behind you actually to see all the Irish flags there and people coming out. How bad is the problem, really? I mean, look, we're sitting in here in London, in Paddington. I mean, how bad is the problem in Ireland? I've heard a lot about rapid population growth, you know, demographic change. You mentioned about public services there. Well, what is going on?
Well, they haven't got the infrastructure for it. And most importantly, Patrick, when you have 5 million people, or 5.7 million, and over 1 million of them are saying that they are not national Irish people, they're not from Ireland, that means the culture of Ireland is being changed. I mean, we were down last week at Newtown, Mount Kennedy, and there was a GAA pitch, which is straight across the road from a ex-convent, where they are now putting in migrants into that. Now, I can tell you that GAA is a very good organisation in the Republic of Ireland. It is the hub of the community, and all of a sudden there was a court order to stop locals using that pitch because there was migrants going in the other side. And more importantly, as I've said before earlier on the week, the average price of a house in Newtown, Mount Kennedy is 300,000. Some are 5.2 million. I mean, I would love to live in Wicklow. It is a beautiful spot, and all of a sudden the migrants are no longer going into Ballymun, Finglas, East Wall, where people said, oh, it's working classes, don't worry about them. They're now being pushed into these really high-class areas, and it is affecting the tourist industry massively. I mean, I had to pay quite a sizable coin last week to stay there because there is no hotels, because they're full of migrants and the price of hotels is going up. And if you want to see how that really plays out, our finance minister in Northern Ireland, Conor Murphy of Sinn Féin, said last week that the hotel sector was thriving in Northern Ireland, and well, you can imagine people are coming north of the border to stay because we still have a substantial amount of hotels. So the row is going on here, and it's mostly going on over infrastructure.
I mean, Doogie, it's very interesting though, isn't it? Because of course England has had extremely high levels of immigration, Wales too, Scotland to a lesser extent, for years, decades now, and you haven't seen this type of response really. Not thousands of protesters like this protesting immigration policy. The Irish are taking a rather different attitude, are they not?
Well, if you take it that you know, England, Scotland and Wales, if you get 1 million migrants in there, it'll not have the same effect on their culture, because up to 10 years ago, just over 10 years ago, there was only 3.7 million people in the Republic of Ireland. There's now 5.7 million people in the Republic of Ireland, and what they are seeing is that their culture is being eroded for the sake of everyone else that is entering the country. So there is a problem where they're saying, well, migration isn't on the same numbers, immigration is not in the same numbers, but it is most definitely affecting them per head a lot quicker. And that's why the Irish do push back They always push back, and they have said this isn't going to happen in Ireland. It's happened all through the UK. It's definitely not happening here. And you can see from this, I mean, this protest is about to get underway down through O'Connell Street, and the guards have, I mean, when I was on my way up here, the security presence here was huge, right through O'Connell Street, right through past the post office, and then they're only going to get down to Customs House Quay, which is a very short walk for a protest of this size, and they will pick up numbers on the way down through.
I mean, Doogie, any sniff of a counter-protest? Are there any sort of refugees welcome, migrants welcome protesters there as well?
Well, that's why the parade has been rerouted slightly, because just down the road there is going to be a counter-protest, and we expect that the public order unit of the Garda Síochána will be trying to keep those two separated. So in a few moments, as soon as I get off the air here, we'll be trying to get in front of that protest to go down to that area to see exactly what's happening.
Well, we better let you get going, Doogie. Thank you very much. You take care out there, and we'll be going to you again throughout the day here on GB News. That's Doogie Beattie there, who's our Northern Ireland reporter, who's headed south, and he's in Dublin at the moment as the Irish continue their protests over what they see as, you know, vast, uncontrolled and, you know,
Very
shameful, I
interesting.
suppose, illegal migration.
Very interesting indeed. Now, as the country celebrates 1 year since the coronation of King Charles III, we're going to bring you the very latest on his first year as our monarch. Should we get your news headlines first?
It's 2:34. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. Former First Minister of Scotland, Humza Yousaf, has congratulated John Swinney on becoming the new leader of the SNP. John Swinney says he's deeply honoured to take the role. He was unopposed in the race after the veteran party activist Graham McCormack pulled out late last night. The new leader is expected to be voted in as Scotland's new First Minister at Holyrood later this week. Rishi Sunak conceded for the first time the Tories may not win the general election. The Prime Minister believes Britain's heading for a hung parliament, but says the public wouldn't want a Labour coalition with the SNP. Rishi Sunak has described the local election losses as bitterly disappointing. The Conservatives lost nearly 500 council seats and the Mayor's position in the West Midlands. The Prime Minister's urging his MPs to end their divisions and come together to take on Labour. Gun salutes have rung out across the capital, marking the first anniversary of King Charles' coronation. The Honourable Artillery Company fired 62 volleys from Tower Wharf, that's next to Tower Bridge, an hour earlier a 41-gun salute from the King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery was heard in Green Park in central London. Both regiments were involved in last year's coronation ceremony at Westminster Abbey and fired the guns to signal the moment the crown touched the King's head. And could your local be on the verge of reopening? Heineken says it's going to invest almost £40 million to create 1,000 new jobs and bring back 62 pubs that have closed this year. The Dutch company says it intends to transform hundreds of tired establishments into premium locals. And for the latest stories, you can get GB News alerts. Scan the QR code on your screen or go to our website for more details.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News forecast. Through Bank Holiday Monday, it's rather wet. There'll be some heavy thundery showers in places, but there will be some warm sunshine. That's thanks to an area of low pressure, but it's all changed through the week ahead. High pressure is going to build in for much of the country, bringing some dry weather with some warm spells of sunshine. Back to the rest of Bank Holiday Monday, some heavy downpours across southeast England that could lead to some local disruption. Elsewhere, sunny spells and scattered heavy showers, some slow moving, hail and thunder in there too. Met Office warnings in force. Cloudier and drier for Northern Ireland, Northern Scotland. In the sunshine, temperatures again approaching 19 or 20 Celsius. Under the cloud around 14 or 15 degrees. Thunderstorms start to ease through the evening time. Still some rain affecting southeast England, which could be heavy at times, but into the early hours it gradually pulls away. Overnight it's largely dry. There could be some drizzle in the thicker clouds, some low cloud mist and murk developing as well. Temperatures generally holding up well above freezing, but a grey start to Tuesday. Low cloud mist and fog slowly lifting and breaking, and then through the day, yes, there'll be quite a lot of cloud, but it will brighten up as the day goes on. There will be some sunny spells that develop, but where the sunshine develops, particularly in the south, we could again see some heavy showers developing here. Temperatures approaching 20 Celsius, further north around the mid-teens.
The latest GB News travel. Good afternoon, I'm Samantha Dean. Stamford Bridge in East Yorkshire, the A166 The Square westbound slow. It's due to holiday traffic around Church Road. In Oldham at Hollins in Greater Manchester, the A6104 Hollins Road's closed in both directions due to an overturned vehicle from Corona Avenue to Copster Hill Road. Buckinghamshire at Gerrards Cross, the M25 clockwise heavy due to an earlier accident after junction 16 of the M40. Congestion to junction 13 at Staines. At Johns Cross in East Sussex, the A21 Johns Cross Road is closed. Delays due to an accident. Investigation work there between Cripps Corner turnoff and Johns Cross roundabout. Honiton in Devon, the A30 bypass is blocked. That's at the Honiton turnoff.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Gloria Di Piero. This is GB News, Britain's election channel.
Welcome along to Good Afternoon Britain. Now, today marks the one-year anniversary of the King's coronation, which has been marked by a 41-gun salute and a couple of other salutes as well.
62.
62-gun salute.
62 as well at Tower Bridge. Now, a year in which the King has stoically battled cancer, and we've now seen him return to frontline royal duties, haven't we? Joining us now is the former royal correspondent for The Sun, Charles Ray. Charles, we watched the two-gun salutes live on this channel. Fantastic as ever. Always great to see. Always great to see a nice tradition like that upheld. Difficult year for the King. He hadn't been seen for a couple of months at least, nearly 3 months, I believe it was. Immediately back to his public duties now. What's your takeaway from the past year?
Well, hello, Emily and Patrick. I mean, it's been a difficult year for the King. Let's not pretend it hasn't been. I mean, he's had to step into the shoes of his mother, very, very huge shoes to fill. She had 70 years at the job. He's had 12 months. And he's still got the twin problems of his son, Harry, and Andrew that he's still got to deal with. And I suspect that those are going to be ongoing problems as he carries on with his tenure as king. And of course, as you mentioned, he had to reveal that he was fighting cancer. His daughter-in-law, Catherine, was also fighting cancer. So it's not been an easy time. But throughout all that, he has done his best. He authorised certain details of his condition to be revealed, as did Catherine. And he's battled through. He's continued to carry on working, much to Camilla's annoyance, because I think she wanted him to rest a lot more. But behind the scenes, he was still doing his red boxes, dealing and talking with people on Zoom, and he's now back to face-to-face meetings.
Well, indeed. And actually, a little bit later on, I'm talking to Penny Mordaunt, who is played a starring role in that coronation, and she is, in her role as the as leader of the Privy Council as well, she talks about what it's like to actually still talk to King Charles every single week. So she's got some insight for that. But in the popularity stakes, Charlie, he's doing very well. 56% of people believe the King is doing a good job. That's compared to 49% a year ago. And 60% of Brits believe we should keep the monarchy, compared to just 28% of people who would prefer a republic. So whatever he's doing it right.
Yes, he is. And I didn't expect those figures to change all that much, but they have increased in the popularity for the royal family, all of the royal family, well, apart from 3 of them. But it has improved for the King, William, Catherine, Obviously, Princess Anne as well, and Queen Camilla. So she's done a sterling job as well. You know, hers was 14%. It's now, I think it's now something like 30% or almost 30%. So that's not too bad. So, yeah, we're going to have this monarchy for a very long time. And the Republican movement, they may want to have a republic, but it's not going to happen. Well, it's not going to certainly happen in my lifetime, and I suspect not going to happen for many, many moons away.
And Charles, Prince Harry's back in town this week, isn't he, for another anniversary, this time of the Invictus Games. Lots of people talking about, oh, you know, will there be a reunion between Prince Harry and his brother, or at least Prince Harry and the King? Lots of people saying that's not very likely. What do you think?
I doubt very much if Harry will be seeing William. That would be amazing if he did see William. I think William's actually got various duties that he's doing in any case around about the same time. The possibility of Harry seeing the King, yeah, it's possible. When Harry is at his church service at 4 o'clock on Wednesday, the King is hosting a garden party just 2 miles away. So everybody's speculating that Wednesday evening will be the time where the two will meet. How long Harry will stay with the King? Will Camilla be in the room? All these sort of questions are left unanswered. But Harry then departs again. He's off, back to the States, or he's going straight to Nigeria to link up with Meghan on their so-called, royal tour. That is, if you remember, he doesn't bring the family here because this is a very dangerous country. Nigeria is the third most dangerous country in the world.
Yeah, but she'll be all right, Big Charlie, because she's just discovered she's 43% Nigerian, so she's all right.
She's one of the natives. That's how, and I mean that respectfully. I don't mean that to be taken out of context.
No, she said what she's saying. Yeah, 43% Nigerian. She's going to go over there and help to embrace with the local culture as well. Do you think King Charles gets enough credit, Charlie, for, tough act to follow, unbelievable act to follow? The Queen, impossible act to follow, really. And, he has had a life, hasn't he? Not all of that has been immensely popular with the British public. And yet, here we are now, after a year which has seen him battling cancer as well, and all of that stuff. Here we are now with incredible popularity stakes for the royal family. He's done that. It's a good job.
Yes, it is. And at one time, he was one of the most unpopular people in this country, given his marriage breakup and everything else that was going on at that time. But he has continually worked hard during his time as Prince of Wales, and it increased more so that he's now king. And this poll, if you believe polls, you can look at polls and you can see certain things and everything else. But this is a good poll for the monarchy. It shows that they are getting popular, and I suspect that his cancer diagnosis has helped him in his popularity in the battle, because he's helped an awful lot of people. He's also taking on a lot more of the patronages that his mother used to do as well. So he's got a pretty full workload, and he works very, very hard. And I think he is getting to be much more popular in this country than people have given him credit for.
Yes, I think so too. Charles, thank you so much for joining us today on your bank holiday. Charles Ray, of course, royal correspondent. Yes, do you know what? I think the cancer diagnosis and the way he was quite honest about how he was going into treatment, firstly for the enlarged prostate and then with the cancer diagnosis. And then almost immediately going back to public duties, making it very clear with a statement that he wanted to be doing as much as possible with his condition and everything. I think people just like that, the sense of duty.
They do.
Right? The sense of duty, just calmly getting on with it.
And all of the noises coming out when you speak to people who have sources behind the scenes at Buckingham Palace is that actually it's the aides that have been holding King Charles back because they didn't want, understandably, any hiccups. So as he kind of re-announces himself on the public sphere, it would be quite devastating if he then, for whatever reason, had to, come back on that. But apparently he's been the one driving this forward and saying, look, I really want to keep doing so. A year ago, gosh, what a year it's been, really, just all round, hasn't it? Things did seem a lot different here. Yeah.
What a year.
I loved being being up and down the Mall there. But later on this evening, I am going to be showing you an interview with Penny Mordaunt, who is the leader of the House of Commons. She's, of course, as well, the head of the Privy Council, and she was a starring role, apart from the King and the Queen, on the actual day of the coronation. So I did a sit-down interview with her where we spoke about a whole range of things, what it was like for her on the day, and also educating me and some of our viewers on what her role is, and giving some insights into what it's like to actually spend so much time with the King as well. I don't know if we've got a little clip of that we might be able to play for you now, I think.
It was my first week in the job. So on the Monday I was a junior trade minister, Tuesday I was promoted, Wednesday we tried to have a meeting with the Queen, and then on the Thursday she passed away, and on the Saturday we were doing the Accession Council.
Well, there you go. The words of Penny Mordaunt, interviewed expertly by Patrick
Not sure about
Christie's. Now, we're going to take a quick break, but coming up, the government has announced new legislation that all new buildings will have to have separate loos for biological sex. So say goodbye to gender-neutral toilets. What do you make of all this?
Is it Lou Little, Lou Late?
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Cheryl Baker. Good morning, Cheryl.
Good morning.
When you think back to 1981, I mean, obviously the ABBA victory then wasn't all that long ago, 9 years earlier. Do you think they had a huge influence then on the sort of direction that Eurovision was taking?
Yeah, they did. They changed it completely. Because up to then, it had all been very staid and a bit posh, long frock, sticky bow ties, you know. And then they came along and they blew it out of the water. They looked so different. And they modernised it. And I think, yeah, it made a big change. Made a big change after that.
And we were watching your performance on Eurovision a little bit earlier on of making your mind up. I mean, you had so much fun, didn't you, up on that stage? Were you, in some part, inspired by ABBA?
Yes, I would say so. It was, ABBA was 74. I turned professional in 75 and did my first song for Europe, which was, you know, when they choose the British song to go forward. I did my first one in February 1976. So, yeah, it was only months after ABBA's performance that I started my own Eurovision journey. Yeah, they just changed the face of it. They changed the face of Eurovision. And if you look at what Eurovision is now, I think that all started with ABBA's performance. It made people think this is much more than just a song contest. It's all about the look. I mean, the clothes, they looked fantastic. And even the composer, or not the composer, what's he called? The conductor. He was dressed as Napoleon. It made it fun. Fantastic song, obviously, brilliant singing, but the whole look of it just changed the way that Eurovision is, and to this day.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Right, well, what do you make of this? It's been announced that new restaurants, public toilets, shopping centres and offices in England will now be required to have separate male and female toilets. This is under new legislation being proposed by the government.
So the law will affect new non-residential buildings as part of a push ending the rise of gender-neutral toilets. Well, joining us now to discuss the proposed new law is Fiona McAnana, who's Director of Campaigns at Sex Matters. Fiona, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. As far as I can see, gender-neutral toilets Please, absolutely nobody. Is this now good? Will we all be attending the funeral for gender-neutral toilets?
I think you're right. There might be a few people who don't mind, but surveys have consistently shown that 80 to 90% of people of both sexes prefer the privacy of a single-sex facility. So you have to wonder why on earth these have been eroded and replaced with, anyone can come in kind of toilets, because that's what most people really don't want. I don't think we're saying get rid of gender-neutral toilets completely. And by the way, when we say gender-neutral, we really mean mixed sex, don't we?
Yes, yes.
I think it's fine to have them as a third option, but what has tended to happen is that people have replaced either the women's toilets or both the men's and women's toilets with so-called
usually the women's toilets, Fiona, isn't it? It's usually the women's toilets. But I guess the controversial element of this is the question of where do transgender men and transgender women go? And this is the controversy. How does this square that?
Yeah, I think that has been a driver of this. And I think a solution for those people has to be found. But what's clear is that discomforting 99% of the population in order to do so maybe wasn't carefully thought through. And hopefully now we'll get some better solutions. And bear in mind, this is about new builds and major refurbishments. So anyone planning a new building can plan for those three options: men's, women's, and some single provision, single sex, anyone, individual cubicles. And that's the answer for the trans people.
I think it's quite revealing when you hear some people talk about, oh, well, it's only 0.01% of the population who happens to be trans. What I think they're doing there without realising it is admitting on national television that they actually don't really care about women.
Yes, and I think it's useful to turn that on its head and say, why are we creating so much change and so much discomfort for so many people just to benefit a tiny minority? And I'm afraid I have to conclude it's because the people driving that tiny minority are male people. I don't think a tiny minority of women has that kind of influence.
Fiona, is there any argument to say that perhaps this is state overreach, that people should be able to decide what the toilet arrangements in their business or office are?
Yeah, I think it's a fair challenge. But on the other hand, when there's been such a push from one particular lobby group, and we know that it's not what most people want, I think it's quite helpful to just be reminded of something that we all took for granted for a long time. In other countries in the world, there are international agencies like the World Health Organization lobbying for single-sex toilets, and yet we are losing them.
Yes, it's very bizarre. It's very bizarre. Fiona McKenna. Sorry, I butchered your name.
You're right the first time.
Thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it. That's it from us today.
Yes, that's flown by, hasn't it? It's Martin Daubney up next. I'll be on 9 till 11 with a big interview with Penny Mordaunt. Thank you for today. Enjoyed it.
Thank you for today too. I like my single-sex toilets.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather. It starts to settle down over the next 24 hours after today's heavy rain, but there will be some fog patches, particularly at night, and that's thanks to an area of high pressure. Low pressure moves out the way, high pressure moves in for the week ahead, largely settling it down. Some weather fronts across the northwest at times bringing some rain. This evening time, still some rumbles of thunder, some heavy rain in places, but it does slowly ease as we head towards midnight and into the early hours. The rain just taking its time to clear the far southeast, but generally dry overnight, some splashes of light rain in places, but a lot of cloud, some low cloud too, making it murky over the hills and around the coasts. Temperatures largely remaining in double figures. So it means a grey start to Tuesday morning, some hill fog in places, but as we go through the morning into the afternoon, should lift and break to allow some brighter skies to develop, some sunny spells, particularly across the south and the west. But where we get some sunny spells, it will help trigger a few showers, not as heavy compared to today, but some of them could be on the sharp side. Fewer in between as well, so many places dry with sunny spells. Temperatures again reaching 19 or 20 Celsius in the best of the sunshine. For Wednesday, a murky start again, some fog patches in places, but slowly lifting and breaking, allowing some dry weather and bright weather to develop. Similar for Thursday and Friday as that high pressure builds in, temperatures begin to rise as well.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers. sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's the biggest cash prize we've given away to date. An incredible £20,000 that you could use however you like. And because it's totally tax-free, every single penny will be in your bank account to do whatever you like with. £20,000 in tax-free cash really could be yours this summer. But you've got to be in it to win it. For another chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text PRIZE to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT.